And we are live.
Salutations. This meeting of the Committee of the Whole, Planning and Administration is now called to order. I would ask that you rise as you are able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who have served our community and who are no longer with us, so we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. Thank you. Our clerk this evening is Julia Sipple, supported by Jennifer Page. Clerk, can you please take the roll, noting Councillor Carpenter's absence? He did let us know he was going to be unable to join us this evening.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
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 Councillor Sless.
Present. Present.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Utley.
Present. Present. Present.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Present.
Councillor Vanderstelt.
Present.
Councillor Sicoli.
Present.
And Chair Councillor Wall.
I am here and present. Okay, the rules of procedure. I'd like to remind the committee staff and our viewing public of the electronic participation policy for virtual meetings. For those staff and delegates joining virtually, please keep your video and microphones off until requested by the chair. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. The full corporate policy 050 regarding electronic virtual meetings is available online to review. Now, declarations of conflict of interest. Members of committee, are there any declarations of a pecuniary interest for items appearing on the agenda this evening? Councillor Jan Vanderstelt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Wall. You're doing a splendid job tonight so far. As usual, as I have declared for the last 3 years, I have a conflict with 5.1, including the involvement of Lisani Homes. Lisani Homes is an ongoing customer of our family business, Serenity Country Candles. Thank you.
Are there any other declarations of conflict for pecuniary interest? Seeing none, moving right along, separations of items for consideration and consent items for discussion purposes, noting that the following items will be automatically separated for discussion. Item 7.1.3 due to the delegation and amendment, item number 7.1.4 due to the delegation, and item 7.1.1 as there is a fill in the blank, which I imagine is something. Okay, and then of course 5.1 for the conflict that Councillor Vanderstelt has just declared. I see in the room Councillor Martin.
Yeah, item 7.1.8, Police Station Task Force Report.
Thank you. Any other items?
No, that's it for me.
All right, Councillor McCreary.
Sure, thank you. Item 7.1.2.
Excellent. Okay, nobody virtually. I'm checking, Councillor Van Tilburg, and nobody else. Great, okay. Councillor Antosky, can you move the motion to approve all items?
Was that separations?
Yes, it was, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Did I hear 7.1.2?
7.1.2 is separated.
Thank you. I was just making sure that I heard properly.
Of course. Okay. Councillor Antosky, can you move the motion to approve all items for consideration consent, 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion purposes?
Moved by myself, seeking seconder. Thank you, Councilor Martin. That all items for consideration and consent 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Okay, I will now call the vote on all items not separated for discussion purposes. Clerk Julia, could you please read the titles of all items that are subject to the vote and then proceed with the vote?
Thank you. And just to confirm, Mayor Davis was the seconder.
Oh, I see Councillor Utley. Sorry.
Councillor Utley?
No, he wants to speak.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Could we separate 717, please? I apologize.
Absolutely. No apologies necessary. That's what we're here to do. Julia.
Thank you. So all items subject to the vote are as follows. 715, road closing and conveyance portion of unopened road allowance west of Morel Street. 716, Trillium Way Paris new development agreements. 721, 2021 council and committee attendance report. 722, all minutes.
Let's vote. I'm going to vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. All items not separated for discussion purposes carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Okay, we are going to now move into a public hearing, and as is the nature of our ways, I'm going to now hand over the chair to His Worship Mayor Davis. So we're going to take a quick 1-minute recess.
All right, we'll now move to item number 5, where we're convening as a statutory public hearing under the Planning Act. And we have one matter that's on tonight's agenda. The public hearing or meeting is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support of or against the application. At the end of the public meeting portion, the committee will then pass a recommendation, which is generally considered for final decision at the next meeting of council, which is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding this application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. The procedure we follow is that the applicant speaks first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. The applicant then has an opportunity to provide clarification or rebuttal to any questions or issues raised during the meeting. So we'll now consider item 5.1, which is an application for zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1121, the address being 461 Blackburn Avenue. So I'll now ask the applicant, who I think is coming in by Zoom, I believe it's Dave Ashton of MHBC Planning.
Good evening.
Ashton,
And
floor is
council.
yours.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening, although I think I will need to venture down there and take in the new council chambers. They look fantastic. So this evening, I just wanted to provide a brief presentation of the request to the zoning bylaw as it relates to a block. We reference it as block 303 within the Lausanne Homes plan, a subdivision on Shellard Lane. We've been working with staff on this bylaw for some time. There are a lot of details associated with the bylaw as it relates to the various aspects associated with a draft plan, a condominium, to create puddles within the block. And next slide, please. So by way of background, this block was within a plan of subdivision that was approved in 2000 and with applications submitted in 2016 that was then approved subsequent to that. The lands are zoned to permit the townhouse uses currently, and a site plan application was applied for in 2020, and final site plan approval was received in November 2021. So the lands have the zoning in place. What's being proposed tonight relate to details associated with very specific items. There's no changes proposed this evening to any of the uses or any of the parking regulations. And as I mentioned, are specific to certain areas, which I'll get into. Next slide, please. This just represents the approved site plan. So the approved site plan is based on detailed analysis and input and final approval from city staff, engineering, planning, public works. So the plan has gone through the detailed site plan review process. And as I mentioned, the next step as it relates to this block was to move forward with the draft plan of condominium approval and the building permits. Next slide, please. So tonight, the request associated with the zoning bylaw is to recognize various site-specific requirements that really come about as a result of the creation of parcels of tied land through the plan of condominium. And as I mentioned, there's no changes to a number of units or parking revisions. The requests are specifically associated with internal units or blocks within the plan of subdivision. And the next slide I have illustrates those areas where the requests are related to. So the next slide, please. As you can see, the units adjacent to Blackburn Drive, as they've been site plan approved, there's no change to the building orientation associated with the request. The pink areas represent areas where there are changes associated to, for example, on the back-to-back units, the front yard setback. And that is because as the parcels of tied land create each individual lot for each unit, we need to look at measuring setbacks from each individual unit versus the block as a whole, which is the approach that's taken at the site plan approval. The block to the rear, that relates to, again, the overall, or not the overall, the amenity space specific to those units. The overall amenity space that's provided on the plan meets the requirements associated with the bylaw and as was considered through the site plan approval. Next slide. So this is a table that identifies and the arrows where changes are being proposed. You can see the lot areas. Again, this is really a function of creation of the parcels of tied land. The front yard, there are spaces where the garage is set back at 5.6 meters and the dwelling unit at 2.6 meters. Again, internal configurations are what are driving the need for those changes. And then the rear yard setback associated with the block townhouses for those internal areas. And then the broader amenity area, again, this really relates to the change associated with where the parcels of tied land are identified and how the lots are created for each of the units. You can see with this table that there's no changes to landscape open space or the off-street parking requirements. Next slide. So we've been working with staff, as I mentioned, through the various processes associated with site plan approval, the draft plan of condominium, and our request this evening we see as technical amendments to the bylaw to recognize the change in tenure of the lands through the plan of condominium and creation of the parcels of tied land. and be happy to answer any questions. I know we have been in discussion with city staff in coordination of their presentation, and we can work through any details associated with the proposal following the staff presentation or any public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Aston. There are some questions. First of all, Councillor Wall.
I appreciate you calling upon me, Mr. Chair, but I did not raise my hand.
Yeah. They're playing tricks on me up here. Anyone have any questions, Mr. Aston? Well, we can't let it go without a question, so I'll ask you a question. When I was going through, can you give us that last slide? It was the comparison of what was required and what you're providing.
Oh, Mayor
perhaps
Davis, I don't
perhaps-
have control. There we go.
Well, I
Thank
do,
you.
and so now we see it. So there we go. So in respect to the amenity areas, what's required is 9 meters squared per unit. What's being provided is 1,141. Can you tell me in terms of beyond the numbers, how will that be reflected in the proposal? So I know in respect to other categories, it's smaller, it's less than the required requirement. But in this area in landscaped open space, it's substantially more. So how will we see that? What will we see in the development that will reflect the greater percentage of amenity area and landscaped open space?
Thanks. The site plan itself, if we went back to the site plan, that's really where visually we see the amenity area and the landscape open space requirements. What happens is there's a calculation as to the determination of the central or a shared amenity space. And then each unit also needs to, or each unit is also providing amenity space. So where the townhouses are to the rear block, where there's a reduced rear yard setback, there's a reduced amenity space, but overall we've looked to pick up the general amenity space in that one central, it's hard to read on my plan, central amenity space. The calculation difference is, and I think I may need to come back to clarify the overall difference, and maybe staff have that. But I think you're asking how does the math work out and what's the variance?
No, I'm really not asking for the math. The math, it's pretty clear it's about 20% more, but I'm just asking you, what will the person who lives there, they don't live in the world of numbers, they live in the world of amenities. What will they see there they may not see if it was smaller?
Oh, they'll, I guess what they would see is that larger, I'll call it central amenity space that provides the opportunity for them if there was smaller space. That's the key to the development, is that space. And then, for example, in the back-to-back townhouses where they don't have a rear yard, they are going to have the opportunity for that central amenity space.
Right, and I realize through the site plan control process, you'll indicate what's going in there, but that would be, for example, the amenities could be benches, green space, playground space, that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely, that's correct. I could pull the landscape plan after the staff and come back to clarify, but that is the intent of that amenity space.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Mr. Aston? Seeing none. So hang on, Mr. Aston. There, you of course have that reply after we hear from staff and the public. So let's then move to the staff presentation. And I believe we have, is it Sarah or Joe that's going to be doing this for us? Both of you.
Sit or stand.
Doing it.
That is correct.
Well, it is International Women's Day.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Haig, Planner in Development Planning. I have prepared a presentation this evening regarding zoning bylaw amendment PZ-11-21 for 461 Blackburn Drive, formerly referred to as 501 Shellard Lane, Block 303. This presentation will provide an overview of the application, as well as the planning analysis completed by staff. Next slide, please. This development has already received approvals through a neighborhood plan, a zoning bylaw amendment, plan of subdivision, and site plan control. The purpose of this application is a minor zoning bylaw amendment, a minor amendment to zoning bylaw 160-90 to allow relief for reduced lot area, reduced rear yard setbacks, reduced front yard setbacks, and reduced amenity space for 131 proposed townhouse units. The requested amendments are a result of recent changes to the proposed development concept. Next slide, please. The subject lands are within approved plan of subdivision 29T-16502, which has a total area of 31.2 hectares or 77.3 acres. The development is well underway on a portion of the subject lands. The lands are located south of Shellard Lane and west of Empire Communities phases 6 and 7. The surrounding lands include the remainder of the approved plan of subdivision file 29T-16502. Further northeast are phases 1 through 7 of Empire Communities, Winfield West, which are currently under development for a mix of single detached and street townhouse dwelling units. To the southwest, the lands are vacant to be developed as phase 8 of Winfield West, Empire Communities. The land to the northwest, across Shellard Lane, contains some vacant parcels, and approvals are in place for future residential and commercial development. The lands subject to this application are 2.5 hectares or 6.2 acres in size. An application for site plan control, SPC-11-20, was submitted prior to this application and received final approval in November of 2021. Next slide, please. The site will consist of 3 back-to-back townhouse blocks and 19 block townhouse blocks for a total of 131 townhouse units. The site is also subject to a draft plan of condominium application. The requested amendments are a result of recent changes to the proposed development concept, which includes creating parcels of tied land by way of a common elements condominium rather than a standard condominium, as initially intended. A parcel of tied land, or a PODL, is essentially a freehold property within a common elements condominium that is registered under the Condominium Act. The proposed type of condominium is comparable to a plan of subdivision in terms of layout, except that the internal street provides access to all of the units through a private roadway instead of a public municipal street. The other difference is that a standard condominium would have been a block development, so the zoning provisions would have applied to the block as a whole and not to the individual units. The block meets the provisions of the current zoning bylaw. However, the common elements condominium creates the PODLs, which require the zoning provisions to be applied to each PODL or each lot individually. Some of the proposed PODLs are deficient from the provisions of the existing bylaw, as it was drafted to apply as a block to the block as a whole. Accordingly, the applicant has applied to further amend the site-specific provisions of the R4A-61 zone to introduce provisions specific to the PODLs, which will permit reduced lot areas, reduced front yard, reduced rear yards for some of the PODLs, and to reduce the amenity area for the development. In order to facilitate the development, the introduction of definitions for back-to-back townhouse unit and parcels of tied land are proposed. Next slide, please. The proposal remains consistent with the growth plan and the provincial policy statement. The subject lands are designated residential, and the proposed application supports the vision of the official plan by providing a range of dwelling types. The proposed use of the lands has not changed and remains in conformity with the City of Brantford official plan. The development is a medium density development, commonly referred to as the missing middle, which is considered to be absent from many mid-sized municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Accordingly, this development will contribute to providing a more full range of housing types in the City of Brantford. Next slide, please. The subject lands are currently zoned residential medium density type A, exception 61, R4A-61 zone. The applicant Applicant is seeking to further amend the provisions of the R4A-61 zone to facilitate the development of the lands for 131 townhouse units, which are permitted under the R4A-61 zone, by creating separate provisions for the entire lot and for the individual parcels of tied land. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The applicant has proposed to reduce the amenity space from 9 square meters per unit, which would account for a total of 1,179 square meters for the 131 units, down to 1,441 square meters for the entire development, which is provided as one large central amenity area. The central amenity area provided is in addition to the rear yards provided for the block townhouse units, and the 38 square meter reduction in the central amenity area will allow larger, more appropriate rear yards for the units abutting the central amenity space. Accordingly, staff considered this reduction minor, as it will not impact the usability of the space. This amendment will also introduce zoning provisions specific to each PODL. The applicant is proposing to reduce the PODL lot area for the block townhouse units from 135 square meters to 95 square meters, reduce the PODL lot area for back-to-back townhouse units from 80 square meters to 79 square meters, reduce the front yard setback to the garage from 6 meters to 5.6 meters, and the front yard setback to the dwelling unit from 3.5 meters to 2.6 meters, to reduce the rear yard setback for 2 of the block townhouse units backing onto the amenity space from 6 meters to 4.5 meters, and to reduce the rear yards abutting Blackburn Drive from 6 meters to 4 meters. Staff are supportive of these amendments as they are considered minor, as a sufficient amount of amenity space will continue to be provided, the required amount of parking is still being accommodated on site, and the reductions will assist in providing an enhanced streetscape in a pedestrian-friendly environment. The bylaw will also include definitions for back-to-back townhouse dwelling unit and parcel of tied land. Next slide, please. In September of 2016, when the initial subdivision, neighborhood plan, and zoning amendment applications for this development were received, the ward councillors mailed a letter to residents in the neighborhood notifying them of the application and asking for feedback on the proposal. The letter stated that if a significant number of concerns were expressed, a neighborhood meeting would be arranged to address the concerns, and if no significant concerns were received, a meeting would not be held. No concerns were expressed, so it was determined that a neighborhood meeting was not required. Currently, the subject property is in an area that is still under development, and a large portion of the surrounding lands are still owned by the applicant. Given that the applicant is proposing minor adjustments to the previously approved zoning amendment, the ward councillor determined that a neighborhood meeting was not required. A public notice was also mailed out to all 12 residents within 120 meters of the property on February 15th. To date, no comments have been received from members of the public. Next slide, please. The main development considerations for this proposal were site plan control, urban design, and draft plan of condominium. Site plan applications are received and technically reviewed after the zoning is in place to permit the proposed development. This development has already received approval for site plan control in November of 2021, as the zoning that was in place at the time established for the development to proceed as a standard condominium, where the zoning is applied to the block as a whole. The change to the common elements condominium has triggered the requirement for additional amendments to the site-specific provisions. These lands were the subject of applications for neighborhood plan NP-02-16, zoning bylaw amendment PZ-07-16, and draft plan of subdivision 2019-16502 in 2016, which all received council approval. The proposed development is in keeping with the original approvals and will continue to complement the existing character of the surrounding community and will make use of high quality materials and finishes such as stone and brick masonry and different metal cladding. In planning staff's opinion, this application does not impact the design of the development, and the townhouse units along public streets and the overall plan for the site continues to respect existing density and maintains an aesthetically pleasing and pedestrian-friendly environment. The applicant has also submitted a common elements draft plan of condominium application. The proposed townhouse units will be individually owned, but all owners of these units will pay condominium fees to cover maintenance of operational costs of the common elements. As per the delegation of authority policy, which was adopted by council in October of 2021, the process of draft plan of condominium has been streamlined. The draft plan of condominium and proposed conditions will be circulated for technical review, which will include input from members of council on the conditions. Final approval will be issued by the Director of Planning and Development / Chief Planner. Next slide, please. The proposal is a medium density development, commonly referred to as the missing middle, which will help ensure the specific built form is achieved. It is considered to be consistent and compatible with the surrounding development in the immediate area and will continue to allow for a residential form and density consistent in this neighborhood. This development is in line with the province's new formed Housing Affordability Task Force's recommendations, which were released in a report in January 2022, and identified intensification within existing built-up areas as one of the most important residential housing priorities. In conclusion, planning staff recommend that zoning bylaw amendment PZ-11-21 be approved, as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan and the official plan. The application represents good planning and appropriate intensification of an already built-up area, as it will facilitate the development of residential housing, which will assist in meeting minimum intensification and density targets in the growth plan. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. From within the council chamber, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, sir. I'm looking at the townhouse dwelling lot area minimum, which is 135 square meters. And the proponent is suggesting 95 square meters. Do I read that correctly?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So that's what, about a 35% reduction?
Through the chair, that is correct.
And we're okay with that?
Through the chair, yes, that is consistent with other site-specific amendments that have approved roughly 100 square meters per lot.
Don't take this the wrong way, but why bother having any regulations if we can simply accept a 35% reduction in the minimum lot?
Through the chair, we need to have some sort of regulations, always understanding that there are certain circumstances where they may not be fitting for an entire development, and that's why the process is set up to have amendments.
There are a number of other relaxations in this as well. Is this going to produce the kind of a neighborhood that is going to be sustainable in the long term, as we all intend it to be with respect to first-rate accommodations for families?
Through the chair, I do believe so. The overall plan for the site has not changed. It already did receive approvals through zoning and through site plan.
Right.
The only kind of technical amendment is just because they changed from a standard condominium to a common elements condominium. So the plan is not actually changing from what was already approved.
So am I mistaken to presume then if we're allowing the lot size to be reduced by 35%, they're going to shoehorn 35% more units onto the site?
Through the chair, no. The unit size is not changing from the original approvals.
The lot size is?
The lot size is changing.
Yes.
Based on the zoning approvals, but the number of units is not changing.
Okay, and some of that ends up in what's called an amenity area in the middle of the site?
Through the chair, yes.
Now, is there a word that non-planning council folks could equate with amenity? Would it be park?
Through the chair, yes. In this case, the development has a large central amenity area, which is essentially, yes, one big park. There is also other amenity space accounted for. It's not accounted for in the provisions, but in excess is provided in backyards.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
In the council chamber, Councillor Slutz, you're next for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're currently going through a rather painful process of trying to put bike lanes on roads that weren't designed to accommodate them. And it's becoming concerning, I guess, in a number of neighborhoods. Are we designing these with that in mind?
Through the chair, I don't believe these internal streets are planned to have bike lanes, but these are internal to the condominium. They are not municipal rights of way.
Okay, but is that something that we're mindful of when we're laying these things out?
Through the mayor, Joe Muto, manager of development planning, through the mayor to Councillor Sless. We are determining that, Councillor Sless, and I believe Blackburn is identified as a minor collector through this draft plan of subdivision, and will have on-street bike lanes associated with that. I don't believe Mr. Peavers here to confirm that. We can also follow up, and then just a follow up to some of the points that Councillor McCreary raised with respect to some modifications that are before this committee this evening. I guess what we're doing here is we're amending a 1990 zoning bylaw to fit and accommodate built form for 2022. And as we all know, we're trying to address the housing shortage through that, and through the new comprehensive zoning bylaw review and the discussion papers that will be before this committee and council later this year. You'll have a good understanding of where the comprehensive zoning bylaw will be going with respect to how modifications will be associated and other zoning parameters addressed through that work.
Before we go to the Zoom participants, Sarah, I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, what is the difference between a standard plan of subdivision, the pottle or whatever it is, and a vacant land condominium and a normal like apartment building type condominium? What's the difference?
So the difference, a standard condominium is essentially reviewed as a block. So the zoning provisions are applied to that whole development as a block. So the front yard would only apply to the yard abutting Blackburn Drive and not the individual front yards of the internal condominium streets. The common elements condominium creates those pottles. So essentially individual lots within that condominium. So now the provisions apply to each individual lot.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and a vacant land condominium?
Joe?
Sorry, that's a good question.
To you, Mayor Davis, vacant land condominium is pursuant to the Planning Act is a public process actually, and it's generally done through a greenfield development process, which establishes the overall tenure up front, and then subsequent to that, you would get approvals through the Planning Act for site plan control to establish the units in the built form and address all the servicing and road network within that vacant land condominium.
Right. So how are they going to handle problems because they all share a roof, they all share wall space because they're townhouses, but they're separate lots. So how will they deal with issues involving the maintenance of walls and roofs and common windows? How will they address that? Normally in a condominium, the condominium would be responsible for all that for the entire unit. Is each member owner of the condominium going to be responsible for all the maintenance to the outside of their house, and how will they maintain a consistent look?
To Mayor Davis, through the draft plan approval, there'll be specific conditions of draft plan approval that will address some of those items that you've mentioned here this evening, as well as through the declaration agreement. The condo corporation will establish what those parameters will be with respect to updating of shingles, fixing of windows. That will be governed by the condominium board.
Right. A different kind of question, and it comes out of a conversation I had with a counselor from Waterloo. And this person told me that when they have a planning application like this, which is either medium density, the middle build that you were talking about, Sarah, or a higher density, they'll actually include in the report how many acres of farmland this saves in comparison to if the same piece of land was used for single family residential. And they have some kind of algorithm or formula for that. Is that something that you could, some information you could provide to us by the council meeting 2 weeks from now? After speaking to the planning department in Waterloo.
Mayor Davis, I'm sure between Mr. Vries and Ms. Wilmot, we would be able to provide, and myself, of course, something to council in advance And on a go forward basis, I believe that that's something that you'll likely be seeing in our staff reports going forward.
If not, you'll be hearing the same question from me in every particular application. So great, thanks very much. We have outside of the chamber and Zoom, Councillor Sikoli.
I thank you. I do have a question regarding the front yard reduction. Are we going to see any, are the driveways going to be shorter? Are we going to see an issue with cars not properly fitting in the driveways there? And I think that question would be for Dave, perhaps.
Through the chair. No, so this reduction is actually consistent with the standard front yard and parking stall provision in the zoning bylaw. We went through a technical review a while back and reviewed what should be the size of a typical parking stall, and that was decided to be 5.6 meters in length. So this is just consistent with that, and we should not see any concerns around parking or overhang.
Thank you.
So not seeing any other questions. I want to thank Sarah. Thank you very much. And Joe as well. And so now we'll go to the open floor where members of the public can speak to this application either for or against. And the last 2 years, generally you would register. We've had no one register for this evening, but now that we have a hybrid meeting, I do have to ask if there are members of the public that wish to speak either for or against this application. So are there any members of the public who are here tonight? I think there's 2 of you that would like to speak to this application. Mr. Bouchard, are you indicating? When you come to as a presenter, generally it's to present either for or against, but come on up if you have a question. Well, planning staff are here. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer your question. So, Mr. Bouchard, if you're going to do that, you have to come up. This is a planning act hearing. So.
I wasn't planning on this.
Well, it's a planning
just so
hearing, and whether you
happens-
plan on it or not, you have to come up and speak in the microphone.
It just so happens that on my mother's side, who you've met, owned land on Shellard's Lane. So I'm curious about this. There was a plan a number of years ago, and that was approved by the province. And now there's a different plan. Do you have any idea of how much the new plan increases the profitability of the people that are going to build these?
Mr. Bouchard, that's a pretty tough question for staff because they're not the developer. They don't control that. And to be respectful to the Planning Act process, this would be where members of the public come up and speak either for or against the application. But it'll be held in abeyance until the council meeting 2 weeks from now. And certainly I'm sure staff would be open to answering as best they can those questions, or alternatively, you can speak to the developer. So with that, thank you very much, Ms. Bouchard. So I have to say this 3 times. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak either for or against this application? Any member of the public that's present here tonight that would like to speak either for or against the application? So not seeing anybody, we'll now move back to you, Mr. Aston. You now have an opportunity to rebut or provide additional information to conclude the Planning Act hearing. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Davis. I did send in to the clerk. You had asked about the central amenity space and what that was designed for. And I did send in the landscape plan just to provide an image showing a walkway, pergola and benches, landscape area, and then essentially an open area where people can run around and kick the soccer ball or walk their dog. So that's the design intent of that central space. And the reference that, and Sarah did a great presentation, by the way, thank you, Sarah, on where we balance the rear yard. So if you see, it says units 123 to 131 to the right of the amenity area, where we lost amenity spaces by extending off the rear wall 4.5 meters versus the 3 meters. So we lost a bit of room out of the common space, but added that room into the private amenity for those units. And Mayor Davis, I did some quick math on my own to answer your question, because I thought it was an interesting one on the areas. And I took a typical lot in a plan of subdivision of 9 meters by 30 meters, which would be a single about 360 square meters. And what we're requesting of an average of about 95 square meters between the various blocks. And what the comparison is about 11 acres for the single family residential, and just over 3 acres for the townhouse. So that gives a bit of a comparison of the land use difference by area.
So we're saving 8 acres of farmland. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you mind, Madam Clerk, if you could put back up the shared slide of the amenity space? So I'm very glad to see, Mr. Aston, you've got some bike racks and bike parking facility in here, because surely with the price of gas, more people will be riding bikes and using bike lanes. So if we can go to Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have a question about visitor parking. How many visitor parking spots are available as a percentage of total parking?
We are looking at 0.5 per unit for visitor parking. So one space per unit, and then 0.5 per unit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you very much. Dave, let me ask you how your economic forecast looks in light of the fact that the federal government's failed to provide adequate energy supplies to Canadians, and gasoline today is $1.83 a gallon. Are your folks going to buy these units if they're relocating from Toronto now and going back to work there?
Mayor Davis, I'm not an economist. I understand the question, a difficult one to respond to. I think the market's been well received from kind of external and internal interests. I'd have to defer to the Lausanne marketing team to get more of a detailed response on that matter.
So from your point of view, though, it remains economically viable despite the way the economy has been turned upside down?
Through Mayor Davis, economically viable in the context of home purchaser. I think what we're looking at doing here is providing additional housing choice to the community, and that in itself will provide different housing types and forms, or for people to choose based on where they're at from an economic level.
So these won't sit empty, in your opinion?
Through Mayor Davis, no. I believe these will be coming to market very quickly, built and occupied in a timely way.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
All right, Mr. Aston, we don't see anyone else wanting to question. So thank you very much, Mr. Aston.
Thank
and
you.
We'll move immediately to consider the application. So now I'll close the public hearing, and I'm going to ask Councillor Sicoli if you could move the item to get it on the floor, and please state a seconder if you have one.
Yep, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg, that zoning bylaw amendment application PZ-11-21 submitted by MHBC Planning on behalf of Lausanne Homes affecting lands at 461 Blackburn Drive, City of Brantford, to further amend the provision of the residential medium density type A, exception 61 zone be approved in accordance with the applicable provisions as noted in section 9.2 of report 2022-73, and that pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter, as discussed in section 8.2 of report 2022-73.
All right, so it's on the floor then for discussion. Seeing no hands raised for discussion. Julie, if you please take the vote on it.
Item 5.1, application for zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1121 for 461 Blackburn Avenue is carried on a recorded vote of 8-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, at least less, Barton, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall. Those against, Councillor McCreary.
All right, so that concludes the Planning Act hearing scheduled for tonight. And Councillor Wall, I turn the chair back over to you for the remainder of the evening.
Okay, we're back. Thank you for your patience as we do that quick changeover here. So before we continue to the next item on the agenda, I'd like to take just a quick moment to recognize that today is International Women's Day. International Women's Day has occurred for over a century, with the first gathering held in 1911. The day reflects on and celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call to action for accelerating gender equality. The theme of International Women's Day 2022 is #BreakTheBias. This International Women's Day, city staff and members of council came together to develop a campaign that both celebrates the achievement of amazing women of the corporation of the city of Brantford, while at the same time encouraging the Brantford community to do the same by sharing stories about the women in their lives. I want to give a shout out to city staff and my council colleagues who participated in this campaign to help raise awareness about and advocate for women's equality. To see the campaign and to participate by sharing a story about a woman in your life who has inspired you, please visit our Let's Talk campaign at brantford.ca/Women's Day. So let's talk brantford.ca/Women's Day. And I'd like to take a quick moment for any member of council that might want to say a few words in recognition of International Women's Day. I see Councillor Antosky, one of the most incredible women I know. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. I want to give a shout out to our communications team. And along with all staff and counselors that took part in this, I think some of our counterparts didn't know what they were getting into, but thank you very much for having a good sense of humor while addressing something that is serious. And thank you to all the wonderful staff who came forward, and for our creative communications team who did 2 videos, one that was kind of cheeky and the other one that was following the outline set out this year in the theme of Break the Bias. We had many people participate. I think it was a great campaign. We really recognized it on a higher level than I've seen in a lot of communities. So thank you to everyone who was involved.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. And Councillor Sikoli, please, the floor is yours.
Well, there's not much more to say from what Councillor Antosky just shared, but what a powerful experience to be in the same room with all of these incredibly powerful women that we have working right here at the City of Brantford. And we had quite a few meetings leading up to this, and it was my first big project as a counselor here with the city. So it was especially powerful for me. But one of the key lines that came out of one of our meetings was, we are community, not competitors, for all of the women out there, so help each other, straighten our crowns and come together. We are a very powerful force, women in this community. So equality and diversity, and there's so much that ties into this. And I really do hope that we see this come forward every year with a campaign that will only get bigger and badder moving forward. So thank you again to everyone who participated in this. It was my absolute honor and pleasure to work alongside all of you.
Thank you, Councillor Sikoli, and wonderful words. So moving on to presentations and delegations. Oh, Mayor Davis, we're not moving on. I apologize. Your worship.
Well, there has to be a male speak to this. So this is a very special day for me, and I know that many women have told some of their own stories. And I'd like to take a very quick opportunity, if I may, to talk about the person, probably the most important person in my life, who was a great role model and mentor for me and demonstrated the power of women and what women can do. And that was my mother, who was one of the youngest. She got married right out of high school, had 3 children, then became the aquatic director of the local YWCA, became the youngest woman to ever obtain the Royal Life-Saving Award of Distinction. I actually learned to swim at the YWCA under my mother's guidance. And then in 1966, the year that the Beatles last played an outdoor concert and the Vietnam War ramped up, she made an announcement to me and my brother and sister she was going to university. And that was 1966. Full-time mother, university. We all were assigned duties. I had to clean the living room and dining room every week. I became an expert at polishing furniture. And she got her bachelor's degree, her master's degree. And the first year that I was attending McMaster as a first-year art student, my mother was in the psychology department taking her first year of her doctorate in psychology. And she really, as a very young boy, had a very strong mother who demonstrated to me day by day in the decisions she made and her drive and determination what it is that women can do. And at that time, it was a bit more of a struggle. But, through it all was family supporting her. And I don't think that's much changed today, that the success of whoever you are, whether you're a woman or a man, very much depends on your friends and family. And I think part of that speaks to that we're all a community, we're all families, and we all better succeed the more we support one another. And the last thing I'd say is the video that I was in, and I've seen this before, talks about it's a very subtle form of bias. And if you truly want to have an inclusive community that's inclusive not only of women, but of also those from many diverse backgrounds, you have to think about the bias in your daily life. And the bias comes from things as simple as in the workplace, you're inviting some of the workers to go out for a drink. Socialization is an important part of most workplaces. And the bias is when you're inviting just the old boys and you're not inviting those who are women or different in your workplace. That's a small example of that. And the video we did the three that we did, kind of demonstrates that as well. And it's very easy to not even think about it and carry on your life living with biases that impact not only you and your quality of life, but also those around you. And it is worth being reminded of that, the impact bias has, and that to be truly inclusive, we need to think about that and how we conduct ourselves in daily life. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to talk about my mother. I always like talking about her. She's a very special person. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. And I see Councillor Utley. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to talk about the women in our life. And I'm very proud to be a husband and a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather. And I won't go into the details of my personal connections with my family, but I do want to say how proud I am to work with all of the staff in the city, and especially our female staff. We have some amazing female leaders, extremely talented. They're going to lead the way. They talk so eloquently sometimes. And, there are some in this room that, I'm so impressed with the way they present information to me and provide information. And it's truly, truly, genuinely, sincerely appreciated. I love you guys as well, so don't get, too upset. Thank you.
Wise words, putting the great in great-grandfather. Okay. We're going to move on then. Thank you very much for everybody for sharing that. So members of the committee, we have 2 registered delegations for tonight's meeting. Lori Newick, please come forward and state your comments on the Heritage Registry project. And be advised, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions for members from the committee. I believe you are attending virtually. Hello.
Hi there, how are you? Thank
Please
you.
state your name and go ahead. And I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Lori Newick. Thank you for your time. I wanted to let you know that I spoke with Patrick Vussier after receiving the City of Brantford Heritage Registered Project letter in the mail. And I'm sure it's a really lovely project for those who wish for their homes to be included. However, I am taking every step I can so that 119 Park Avenue would not be added to the Heritage Register project. I called in and I spoke with Mr. Vussier. I wrote a letter and sent it in. I attended an informational meeting, and now I am here to join the committee of the whole meeting in order to express the fact that I do not wish to be added to this project. I'm not sure how long I'd like to continue to be the owner of this property, and I've been informed by my real estate agent that it's very difficult to sell a property once it has this label. So I really, really, really hope that you take into consideration that I do not wish for 119 Park Avenue to be added to the City of Brantford Heritage Registered project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Okay. Sorry, I need to see. Do we do questions and delegations? Yeah, so there's time left. If any member of the committee would like to ask the delegate a question. Thank you for leaving so much time, Lori, and taking the time to be here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So there are no hands raised. We'll be discussing this item shortly, so please stick around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Warren Bouchard, second time tonight. Come on up. You've got 10 minutes. Or you can keep it brief like Lori did.
I have to introduce myself.
You do need to introduce yourself for the viewing public at home.
First of all, I'd like to thank
You got to speak into the mic for us to be able to hear you.
that one.
Right there.
I'd like to thank the staff. If I'd known how much work I was going to create for them, I probably wouldn't have asked in the first place. Incredible amount of work and extremely well done. So thank you, Patrick, and your staff and the Heritage Committee. Also to the 2 councillors from Ward 2 who were invaluable in their advice and encouragement. I guess everyone has read Councillor Sless's amendment. In 1965, a very strong woman who was important to me, my great-grandmother, sold the property that all of you have seen, I'm sure, which now makes up a good part of Grand Woodlands. And I was there to support her. I believe the property was sold to the Pusey people who were builders at the time. And a promise was made to the family that there would be a street named. Then I was away for about 10 years or 12 years. When I came back to Brantford, Grand Woodlands, which had been partially developed at the time that I left, was now pretty much fully developed. And there was no street name, although there were other names that were not connected to our area at all. And it's always just been an issue with us. And to really appreciate this support that hopefully our family can partner with the city to develop a portion of the Hayman land that is pretty much a woodlot, a Carolinian forest type lot, that we can partner with the city to build a park within a park, a contemplative space with a couple of benches. And we would like to become involved financially to, along with the arborist and the park planning people, build a Carolinian forest to replace the one that was bulldozed a number of years ago in the area between Dufferin Ave and Spring Street for the townhouses immediately behind 64 Dufferin Ave. We think this is an opportunity for our family to partner with the city to build, as I said earlier, a park within a park. And over a period of time, we would be happy to fund tree plantings that would be within the Carolinian forest type. And we would appreciate your support to allow us to partner with the city in support of this endeavor. And that's pretty much everything I have to say. It's been a long time that they were forgotten. My great-grandmother was a very strong woman. She lost a son here in the whatever pandemic we had in 1918. And she was just a remarkable lady. So that's it.
Well, it was great. Thank you, Warren.
So do I stay here or what?
All night? No.
Oh,
You do have 4 minutes remaining. I don't have any other speakers in the queue. We will be discussing this item very shortly, so I hope that you'll stick around.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Come back sometime. Okay. Items for consideration consent. Members of the committee, we will now move on to items separated, starting with items 7.1.3 and 7.1.4 due to the delegations. Councillor Martin, can you please read the motion to place all separated items on the floor for consideration consent not previously voted on, and state your seconder.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councilor McCurry, that all items for consideration consent 7.1 and 7.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Okay, so moving right on. 7.1 is the 2023 55+ Summer Games co-hosting opportunity. Oh, I apologize. We're going to do 7.1.3 first, which is the item Mr. Bouchard just delegated for. Councillor Sless, I believe you have an amendment. The floor is yours.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor John Utley. And the amendment reads that Clause B be struck and replaced with the following. That staff be directed to develop a commemorative sign or plaque in Grand Woodlands Park identifying the wooded area as Hayman Grove, and that 2 park benches be installed adjacent to or within the grove, and further that staff consult with the members of the Hayman family on the wording for the commemorative sign or plaque, and that the funds to install the park benches and commemorative sign plaque described in the recommendation B be funded from Council Priorities Reserve RF 0558 to a maximum amount of $3,000. And if I could, Mr. Chair, this is more of a housekeeping item than anything else. It was an oversight at the time of development, and I think it's a great opportunity to correct the error of our ways back in the day when this was developed. So I think it's very appropriate that we be doing this at this time. It was nobody's fault. It was just something that was missed, and this is an opportunity to correct that mistake. Personally, I have a strong connection to this to the Hayman family. 3 of my children played badminton at a high level, and they were trained by Mrs. Edith Hayman in the city of Brantford, who was a badminton icon in the Canadian scheme of things. She created a Mike Barris, who represented Canada in the Olympics. She was a coach of coaches. She taught coaches across Canada on how to coach young folk in that sport. And she actually took my one son at, I believe he was 13 at the time. He was playing under 14 men's or boys, I guess at that time, doubles. And she elevated them to 4th ranked in Canada. So that they were a sponsored team. Their expenses were paid for by one of the manufacturers. So that was all done through Edith Hayman and her husband, Doug Hayman, who was instrumental with the Brantford Badminton Club. And probably during the turn of the century, I guess in 2000, I worked for about 4 years trying to get a badminton facility into this community on behalf of Mrs. Hayman, and unfortunately had no luck. And even more unfortunate, both Doug and Edith have passed on. So it's something that's coming a little late, but there are still surviving members of the family. In fact, their son, Jeff, is the fire chief, I believe, out in the county. So there's a lot of, besides all of the background that I'm sure you read that staff produced at the request of Mr. Bichard, there's just, I guess, a myriad of reasons why this should be supported. So I would hope, and I think it was alluded to in the presentation by Mr. Bichard, that the family is certainly willing to work financially and work with the city on developing this. I think this is kind of, this amendment really plants the acorn, but I think much will grow from this. And I think we'll have a very nice and something that we can be very proud of. And the family, the Hayman family, can be very proud of once this entire project comes to fruition. So having said that, I would seek unanimous support. I think it's right and honorable to be doing that. So I would encourage everybody to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sluss. Councillor Utley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Bichard. He did an enormous amount of research into the Hayman family, and he wasn't shy about sharing that with us councillors and staff. So I thank you for that. It's been quite a journey getting the history of the family members and those that fought in the Great Wars. So that was interesting. I certainly like to thank Patrick Vassier and the staff for their support in bringing all this information together, the Heritage Committee. And last but not least, this was a joint ward project between wards 2 and 3. So I'd like to thank my 3 colleagues on council for their support on this project, and I think this will be very fitting for the family and as part of our city's history. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Antosky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I think the 2 councillors who spoke previously have covered most of it. I I've appreciated the history and reading the history, and it talks about a time where people lived as community and as a village, and you hear what the Haymans did for their community, and so I love to recognize that, and I think there's a lesson in that for all of us to get back to some of that. Not only does this recognize history, but it also pays attention to our future, because we're paying attention to some of our priorities in terms of that green space, and we have a family that wants to help us do that. And replacing some of those Carolinians is important, and so I think this is a great way to address history and moving forward. So I also hope we get full support on this. Thank you, Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. I see no virtual hands raised. And I see no hands in the room. Stalling. I call the vote. I'm going to vote in the affirmative.
Sorry, just Councillor Antosky. Thank you. The amendment to item 713, Hayman Family History Research and Commemoration, is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderstelt, Letley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Moving right along, item 7.1.4, the Heritage Registry Project Part 2, Phase B, properties recommended for listing. It's amended now, so we're going to vote on that first. Thank you, Julia, for keeping me on track. So we're going to vote again, unless we have speakers, and we do. So we're going to start with Councillor Sless.
No, I was just going to bring that to your attention, Mr. Chair, that we had to vote on it as amended.
I appreciate that. And
Not a
I
problem.
have Councillor McCreary next up.
Chair, thank you. And may I reiterate the comment from earlier that you are certainly doing an excellent job tonight, and how you've grown into this job is quite incredible. I'd like to just tell a little bit about Mr. Bouchard. I see the look on Warren's face. I'm only going to say good things, all right? Mr. Bouchard is a very strong advocate for cultural and heritage issues in this community. He's a member of one of our recently formed committees that's looking at a cultural issue here, a long supporter of the orchestra. And it's interesting how we all of a sudden in the city of Brantford have sort of the critical mass to begin to support some of our culture and heritage, which for many, many, many years took second place, played second fiddle to many other initiatives and things that we did here. And this is another small telling of a story in the Third Ward, which once was wilderness, and out of that wilderness was hacked a living by people like the Haymans, and they probably raised chickens. And now we've come full circle, and we're not only telling the story of the genesis of our community, but there may come a time when chickens will be raised again in that neighborhood legally by citizens of Brantford who are going to be doing what the Haymans did, and that's enjoying the hen fruits of their labors. Thank you, Mr. Bouchard, for bringing this forward and helping us celebrate that story for you and for us.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Now I'm calling the vote on the motion as amended.
Item 7.1.3, Hayman Family History Research and Commemoration, as amended, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderstelt, Letley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Okay, now we move on to 7.1.4, the Heritage Registry Project Part 2, Phase B, properties recommended for listing, financial impact none, 2022-64. So this is separated because we had a delegation. Are there any speakers to this item? Okay, in the room, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff, could someone explain the difference between the Heritage Registry and a heritage designation? Because I think the the presenter didn't understand the distinction between the two.
The chair, Patrick Busser, planner, long-range planning. So under the Heritage Act, there are two main streams of protection. The designation process, which is what most people are familiar with, involves a bylaw being passed by the municipality. That bylaw gets registered on title, and then consent or a heritage permit is required prior to any alterations that might affect a list of heritage attributes or features of the property that give it that heritage value. Special approval is also required before a building with cultural heritage value can be demolished. When a property is designated, it's added on the city's heritage register. Non-designated properties can be added as listed properties, and that is the list of properties before you today. Listed properties do not require a heritage permit for alterations or for renovations, and there's no controls on the actual approval or denial of demolition. There's merely a requirement for 60 days notice to be provided to the city. We do not register anything on title. There's no further controls. It's just merely an opportunity for the city to be aware that a building would be demolished on the property.
Okay, so to be clear, the registration has no restrictions on the property like the designation does.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, and likely would not affect the property value either in that respect.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And just speaking to it, I don't agree with designating a property against the wishes of the owner. So I think the presenter will certainly have my support in not designating a property, but I see no problem with registering it. So with that, I'll be supporting the registration, but I'll also support the resident if someone tries to designate this property in the future against her will, she'll have my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. On Zoom, Councillor Brian Van Tilborg, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Chair Wall. You're doing an excellent job. I have a question for staff. The property on Park Ave, as it currently sits, I just want to make sure I heard correctly, because it was my understanding that if a property like that wanted to be demolished, it was already in a zone that has to come before council for a vote. Is that not correct?
To the chair, Patrick Busser, planner, long range planning. So yes, this property is within the demolition control area set out under the city's demolition control bylaw. The demolition control bylaw, however, only has regard to whether a property is a residential property or not. So there's no controls for the demolition on commercial properties, but because this is a dwelling, it would be captured under that process.
Yes, I just want to stay focused on the 119 Park Ave, as we did have a delegate. It is in an area that has allocated. Is there a potential to opt out of the registry?
So through the chair, adding a property to the city's heritage register is the decision of council. Once council makes a decision, the Heritage Act does allow a property owner to object to that listing, at which point the Heritage Committee would be consulted, and then the city council would have the opportunity to consider that objection.
All right. I mean, we're looking at it very interesting. I used to live on Park Ave, a block away from here. So, and it says here in our documentation that this was the home constructed in 1880 and built by the Cockshuts, who was the mayor of the city later on. My question would be, if council were to say, or the Heritage Committee were to say, you must have this in this registry, what is the person obligated to do? What's the obligation of the registry? What's it actually mean?
So through the chair, having a property listed on the heritage register does not introduce any new obligations. So it'd be the same obligations that exist on any other property, complying with the zoning bylaw, with building code, with property standards. But by virtue of being on the Heritage Registry, there is no special review or additional requirements placed on that property.
Right. So what does it do? What does the Heritage Registry essentially do?
Through the chair, so the purpose is to allow, should there be a demolition proposed, that there are 60 days for the city, for the municipality to discuss that demolition with the property owner and determine if they would like to take other steps to conserve the property. But after that 60-day notice period ends, the demolition process would proceed normally.
And that's essentially what we already have existing on that property, is as you just stated earlier, correct?
Sorry,
demolition. It's already in a zone, a demolition zone.
Yes, through the chair, it is within a demolition control area. So this would go before council if there was a non-routine demolition.
Okay, does the Heritage Registry have a way of highlighting what the history and background of the property was? Just you know, that property was I grew up next to it, and quite frankly, I never knew the history until it was brought before me at council.
Yeah, so through the chair, when a property is added to the Heritage Register, we provide notice as the municipality, and that includes a statement of why we believe it has heritage value. And so in this case, that register would have the property information sheet attached to the report as Appendix B, and would have that history or those details about the property in summary.
All right, thank you.
Right on time, Councillor Van Silberg. Councillor Jan Vanderstel, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far. When we designated the train station on Market Street and got a letter requesting that we don't do that, we ended up registering I think a wall and a facade and a few other parts of that existing building. I wasn't in favor of it then because it does add, although it adds some heritage value to a property, it does unnecessarily encumber someone who doesn't want to have that designation placed on a property they own. And perhaps there is still some consternation on behalf of the delegation that came forward, concerned about whatever part of being included in the registry that we're not aware of. I don't think we have a recourse to do that now, but I guess she must be still in the room with us. If there is additional concerns about being included in the registry, separate and apart from her receiving a designation, I'm hoping that we will hear about those concerns before this comes to council in a couple of weeks. But as it stands right now, I don't think I have access to hear any rebuttal argument on that. Do I, Chair Wall?
Are you asking to speak to the delegation?
It's within your purvey.
Yes, they're not in the room currently.
Okay. I hope that we're not overstepping by including this person's name in the registry or the building in the registry. I hope we hear from the owners if that is indeed the case. But that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Okay, on the Zoom, Councillor Sicoli.
Yes, thank you. So in the report, it clearly outlines sort of an appeal process. So the act allows a property owner to formally object to a council's decision. So where are we in that process with these three properties who object? For instance, do we have to pass this motion to add them to the registry before they can object? Or is the letters that we've already received considered an objection? And if so, it states here that that decision is made by the Brantford Heritage Committee. So is it on its way to committee, or will it only go there after we add them to the registry?
Through the chair, Patrick Busser, planner, long range planning. At this stage, these properties are not yet listed on the City of Brantford's Heritage Register. So these objections are being provided to council for consideration. The Act requires that we notify property owners after the property is listed, but it does not require that we consult with them first. And In our process in Brantford, we have chosen to notify property owners before a decision is made by council. So we've notified property owners with a public information center and a notice with a frequently asked questions and answers. We have consulted with the Brantford Heritage Committee, which is required by the legislation, and now it is going through committee of the whole to council for that decision to list or not list properties. After council makes its decision, we are required to provide notice to the property owners, and that point on, they can then formally object to having been listed. Before a property can be removed, council must consult with its Heritage Committee though. So if an objection is received, we would provide a report to the Heritage Committee first, so that when council formally considers that objection under the Act, council has had that consultation opportunity with the committee. But at this stage, this is an informal, non-legislated objection that has been given to council for consideration before the decision is made.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So my original instinct was we shouldn't put people on the list who don't want to be on the list, but given that the restrictions are quite minimal, and I don't think it has any major impact to the value of the home or what they can do with the home, and there is an appeal process in place, I would like to see if this moves forward as presented, that staff reach out to the 3 residents who are opposed to it, just to make sure that they are aware of the steps that they must take in the appeal process to have their property removed from it. Is that possible?
So through the chair, under the legislation, when we provide that notice, we are obligated to let them know that they can object and what that process is. So our notices do include that information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Sicoli. So seeing no other speakers in the room, I have a couple of questions. Rapid fire. Okay, first, where did this initiative come from? Was this a council initiative, a committee initiative, a provincial initiative? Whose idea was it to create a registry of all the properties of significance in Brantford?
Through the chair, Patrick Gooser, planner, long range planning. So this initiative is sort of multiple origins. The Heritage Act requires every municipality to have a heritage register. And that process is just to identify all designated properties. The listing of properties is optional. So the Heritage Register project itself started in 2017, and that was an initiative following direction from council. And the purpose was to narrow down the non-statutory 9,000 property heritage inventory and sort of get ahead of the curve to identify the properties that have genuine heritage interest.
Okay, next question. Thank you. How many properties are on the registry or on the list? Not designated properties, but how many are on the registry?
Through the chair, 98 properties have been added in August of 2020. And then an additional 77 properties were added in November of 2021. That's the non-designated properties. So we're looking at—
How many are there expected to be?
Overall, approximately 800 properties.
Okay. And then there's a mandate or like a mission statement for this project?
Sorry, through the chair.
Sorry, is there a mandate or a mission statement, like a written mandate or mission statement for this initiative?
The project is a Brantford Heritage Committee priority. I would have to pull the documents to find the exact wording, but yes, there's priority behind this for the Heritage Committee and through the project itself.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, my final question. Is the intent of not putting these houses on this list that they will eventually be designated?
So through the chair, this would act as a way to shortlist the best candidates and then work with willing property owners. We can provide notice after the Heritage Register project is done to the candidates, the properties on the register, and canvass for those who are interested in having their properties designated. But by virtue of being listed, it's not inevitable. It is not a fact that the property will be designated, just that represents and recognizes that they're the best candidates with cultural heritage value in the city.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Seeing no other speakers in the room, no speakers online. And with Julia's thumbs up, we're going to call the vote.
Item 7.1.4 Heritage Register Project Part 2 Phase B properties recommended for listing is approved unanimously on recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sepoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. So now we are moving right along, and it is item 7.1.1, which is 2023 Ontario 55+ Summer Games co-hosting opportunity. And what we are looking for is somebody to nominate a sitting city councillor to fill in the blank. Seeking somebody to nominate somebody else. I see Councillor Dan McCreary waving. No, yes? Okay.
I would like to point out to those folks in charge of the microphones that mine apparently doesn't work. And I hope the mayor doesn't have something to do with that. I'm just saying.
Point of order.
I would like to nominate Councillor Sless. Councillor Sless is he's always been our sport ambassador, and I think he'd do a swell job taking this project underway.
All right, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Antosky.
Well, it's seconded now.
Move we close nominations.
Just like that. Okay. Councillor Sless, do you accept the nomination?
Well, actually, I was on that committee and then it got derailed with the pandemic. So yeah, this is just a reiteration of what was already happening. So yeah, I'll be pleased. There's a good group working on that. So I'm happy to.
That's good governance, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any other speakers? No, I'm going to say a few words. Yeah, you are the perfect candidate for this. I think that when you talk to anybody in this community and you talk about city councilors and people who support the sports in this community, somehow Councillor Sless's name always comes up as somebody who's always just been there when you needed him, works real hard at it. And I'm absolutely happy to support this nomination brought forward by Councillor McCreary and Councillor Antosky. So yeah, right man for the job. So seeing no other speakers. Oh, Councillor Utley.
Talking the.
If you want to say something nice about Councillor Sless, go ahead.
Well, now I've got the floor. Yeah, I'd love to. I can't think of a better choice besides myself. But Councillor Sless is, he's got a long history with sporting activities on this council and previous councils, and he's the right man for the job, no doubt. Thank you.
Wise words. Okay. Mayor Davis? Okay.
Green there.
Thank you. We're going to call the vote.
Confirm we're doing this as a formal amendment.
Is it an amendment?
You did get a mover and a seconder, so it could be treated as an amendment.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Is it friendly?
That's what I was asking you.
Yeah, I think it's friendly.
Okay.
I see a nod and heads in the room.
Okay, wonderful. So it will just be the vote on the entire item.
We're going to vote on the entire item as friendly amended.
Oh, Councillor Utley would like to.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you,
Second
Mr.
time
Chair.
speaking
I did
opportunity.
want to talk to E3, 1, 2, 3 in the report.
Absolutely. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just want to get some information from staff of what does that mean for the three groups that are listed here: community programs and social development, facilities at 50% reduction, parks and facilities department at 50%, and golf ops at no reduction at existing seniors rate. Is this for participating athletes only? Just wanted to clarify that. I'm seeing some nodding of heads.
I see Sarah Monroe, Manager of Tourism, Culture and
Oh,
Sport
there
for the
she
City of
is.
Brantford. Sarah, can you help Councillor Utley out?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Utley, this resolution refers to the events only for the athletes, and those are competitions as well as sanctioned events. So things like the opening ceremonies, the middle night mingle, if it happens in Brantford, it just refers to athlete events and sanctioned events as part of these games.
And is there a cap on the amount of money that it will cost each of those three groups? Or would they just have to absorb whatever those costs are?
Through the chair, our estimated costs based on the facilities that we discussed with those commissions is included. This resolution does allow us, say for instance, Bison's Field is not available because of another event that conflicts. We don't want to displace them. We're going to use a comparable city facility. This resolution would allow us to do that without having to come back to council to waive a very similar cost.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Okay. Seeing no further speakers, no last minute further speakers, I call the vote.
Item 7.1.1, 2023 Ontario 55 plus Summer Games co-hosting opportunity with the friendly amendment is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sepoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Next on the agenda, 7.1.2, acquisition of 159 Dufferin Avenue. I believe that was separated by Councillor Dan McCreary. The floor is yours.
Chair, thank you. And through you, I have a number of questions of staff. We're going to be acquiring this property to create a walking trail from Dufferin Avenue into the park. Does that mean this building will be demolished?
Good evening, Ron Gasparotto, Manager Real Estate. Through the chair. Yes, that's correct, Councilor McCreary. The building will be demolished.
And we're acquiring it from our capital reserve account?
Again, through the chair, that is correct.
And in the event that this is approved, what comes off the 2022 capital project list to make way for this?
Through the chair, I will defer this question to Jennifer Elliott.
Good choice.
Thank you.
Good evening.
So what comes off, Jen?
Good evening, all. Director Jennifer Elliott, Director of Engineering Services. At this point, we have not identified any additional projects to come off of the list within the 2022 plan.
What could we alternately advance if we have that capability to take this on without displacement?
Through the chair to you, Councillor McCreary. At this time, we do not have additional staff capabilities to bring on an additional project, say a road project or a bridge project. This would be done in conjunction with Dufferin Ave, and it would have slight additional time to those current staff members.
So the community would lose 2 affordable housing units as a result of this. It indicates it's a duplex. So does that mean that the city would bring application to the city for approval for the demolition under the demolition control bylaw? In effect, we'd be talking to ourselves.
I'm unsure if Ron was going to answer. Through the chair to you, Councillor McCreary. That is.
It was an easy one. I think he's going to.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Jennifer. Through the chair, we will be applying for a demolition permit. That's correct.
And they no longer come to Heritage Committee, correct? They're simply staff delegated.
I'm going to have to defer that as I've not participated in one.
I think that's the case. Now, with respect to some of the interesting things in the report, do you know, Ron, if there is currently a pedestrian access from the school 2 doors down that leads into the Dufferin Park? That'd be from the, I guess it's a public school. Looks like there is. There's no access from the W. Ross, but it looks like there's access from the public school.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't know if there is a public designated access into that park.
Which would be the absence of a fence.
It could be interpreted as such, that's correct.
Now, it indicates that it's the pedestrian access. So would one presume that there will be a paved trail that leads through there?
I will refer this to Jennifer for any design questions.
Through the chair to you, Councillor McCreary. Yes, the intent is that the home would be demolished and we would have a paved multi-use trail through that area towards Dufferin Park.
Yeah. Time?
Do you want to be down for a second opportunity? You got it. Okay. Councillor John Celeste, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this will create a similar situation to what we have accessing the Gretzky complex. There's a house that was taken down on Fairview Drive that allowed for access to go through. I think it's actually tomorrow. I believe Councillor Utley and I are sitting down with staff to review the finalized plans for the Dufferin Park redevelopment. But my understanding is, before seeing them, I'm quite confident in saying that the redeveloped 6 tennis courts that will be developed in the if you're looking at the park at the far back corner towards W. Ross McDonald School. So what this access does, it allows folks to walk straight in, almost into those courts, which is quite good, because what happens now is if they access off of St. Paul, the courts that they're going to use are the furthest point away from where they enter. So this makes it a lot more convenient for the user. And I believe, as was just indicated, with a paved path trail going in, there's a trail system within this park as it's redeveloped. I believe, and I can be corrected, but I believe that the pad that would go in would integrate right into that pad system of trails within the park. So to me, it's an opportunity. If we don't do it, chances are you'll probably never get another shot at this. And I do believe now that people do migrate through the school ground property. But again, that's very frowned upon during school hours. It's not something that the school likes. And I think they actually advise you not to do that. And I think they come out and verbally tell you don't do that. So I think what it does is it takes all the stress off of St. Paul, which is a very busy street, puts it onto Dufferin, which is not as busy, and allows people to access that way. And it opens up the park to the Homedale area much closer than having to go down and then across St. Paul to get into the park. So it's an opportunity. I think it's a good one. Others might disagree, but I think it's a good opportunity, and I'll be supporting this. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Celeste. First time speaker in the room, Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I was trying to weigh both sides of this this project, but I will always support something that enhances our parks and especially for families, you know, to have kind of one of the last frontiers of free activity, right? I did think about the affordable housing piece, and I thought, well, there's 2 units here, but if we pass up this opportunity, there's no guarantee that the private market is going to not demolish it as well and put something else up, maybe a bigger home, who knows? But we don't know. Right now, we know what we can do with it, and we can enhance you know, some green space and a park in an area that is certainly seeing some growth, and it's a good opportunity with the things that we have going on at Dufferin. So I will be supporting this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. First time speaker in the room, Councillor Martin, floor is yours.
Thank you. Through you to staff, this is a 50-foot lot, and I'm sure we're not going to put a 50-foot wide trail through there. Will some of this be used for parking as well, or is this just going to be green space and a trail?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Martin, and there will be no vehicular access through this lot.
There won't be a parking area there either, just strictly a trail through.
Correct.
Okay, will there be a parking lot with the associated with this park coming off of St. Paul?
Yes, through the chair to you, Councillor Martin. Yes, there is improvements to the current parking facility. It is coming off of St. Paul Ave and it will have the appropriate designated spots.
And how many spots will it have?
Please don't quote me, but I believe there is 53 spots within the plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Okay, first time speaker in the room, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also supportive of this initiative. It's quite unique in that a home in a very nice area of the city comes up for sale, and the estate of the owner is offering to the city first at a much reduced. So I'm sure it goes for way more than that on the market. So it does provide people that live on Dufferin and in that surrounding area easy access to the park and the tennis courts and the trail that's going to be constructed within the park as well. And it's the time is like all the stars have come to meet at this point, and we'll, as Councillor Celeste said, we'll be meeting with staff I think this week, next week to let's share all the details of where the park is at this point and the timing of each stage of its development. So I hope we get support for this. I think it'll be good for the neighborhood, good for the kids. They don't have to go close to St. Paul Ave, and it'll be a nice lead-in to the park from Dufferin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. You've been waiting very patiently. Councillor Brian Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I feel a little differently about this, and I feel it in my gut. You know, we're spending millions of dollars renovating the park, and that's significant. And then we're going to be spending $650,000 to purchase a home, and then we're going to have to spend to knock it down for what amounts to as little as an easement to allow people to walk into the park. And you know, everything seems rosy and well and good unless you're somebody that's living in a place, and that place gets taken away from you and crushed. You know, we see this happens in life, and sometimes that's hard. So I just can't go forward with this one.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. I see Councillor Jan Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jennifer, I believe. This is the frontage on this property. Is that 65, 70 feet?
I am just pulling up the report as well with the frontage. That data was entered by Ron Gasparetto.
Yeah, through the chair. Sorry, my mic didn't come on. The frontage is 52 feet.
52. Okay. And sorry, no additional thought was given, Jennifer, to perhaps on one side of the access point or one end of the property to put in some additional angled parking? At no point did we discuss or try to verify whether or not that would be necessary, not only for today, but into the future. The reason why I'm saying is In so many situations like this, a school over time will either decline in numbers so far as to close it. And you get an infill, a residential infill project happen on that location, including all the infill that we're expecting to see, no matter where we are in the city. But was there any discussion about adding, perhaps in the future, perhaps some additional angled parking down one side, just to increase that capacity for the park use?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Vanderstel, it could definitely be looked at in the future. I believe that when the property owners were contacted and spoken to, that was one of the questions, is if there will be vehicular access or simply pedestrian access.
Okay, and there was a preference one way or the other? Sorry.
Through the chair, yeah, the preference was to keep it a pedestrian access.
Oh, I see. Okay, understood. So, okay, so we did get a fantastic break on the price of this property in the hopes that it would be used for pedestrian access and obviously bikes and alternative means of transportation for the neighborhood. Yeah. Okay, understood. Okay, so it had some very well intended strings attached. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Next up, Councillor Osipoli.
I do believe I just had my question answered in the last 3 seconds of that conversation there, but just for, I guess my question was just surrounding clarity and ensuring that what we're passing today is just to purchase this property, not what will be done with the property. But it sounds like our hands will be bound by what happens with this property once we purchase it, correct?
Through the chair, there are no conditions stipulated on how the property will be used. We went to the abutting property owners and we kind of, we gave them a conceptual idea of what was happening in terms of it was going to be used as a pedestrian access. But there's no commitment to any design from the access just yet. I think that's going to be done through the work through Jennifer's group.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is because I'm wondering if we could have the best of both worlds by retaining the existing duplex with some sort of pathway / easement that connects the two. And I wanted to make sure I was not voting on what specifically would happen with that parcel of land. I have a really hard time stomaching tearing down a duplex for a pathway. So I'm internally distraught on that. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sicoli. Seeing no other first-time speakers, I have a quick question. Is the property inhabited currently?
Through you, Chair. No, it's vacant.
Has it been? So it's a registered duplex.
Through you, I'm not sure of the legal status of it, whether it's a legal non-conforming or an illegal duplex. But there are 2 units.
But no one's living in.
No, the owner is deceased, and it's being sold through the estate.
Okay, that was my questions. Thank you. So second-time speakers, Councillor McCreary, the floor is yours.
Chair, thank you. Respectfully, I'm not going to be supporting this, and I'll tell you why. I think if you look at item 7.0 in the report, for those tuning in at home, it's a standard reporting item that we see in every report that comes before us. It says there's a high trust in the city through demonstrated progress in taxpayer affordability and value in money. And I would say in the grand scheme of things, we can't afford this and it gives us no value. We can't afford it because we talk at length about our infrastructure deficit, about our need to fix roofs and fix sidewalks and roads and curbs. And we're looking at spending more than $500,000 of that limited fund to buy ability to tear it down to create an alternate access to a park. So I don't think it is affordable, and I don't think it gives good value to send something to the landfill that we buy. When I look at The other thing that we do, for those of you watching at home, we're now obsessed with climate and environmental implications, and we have to evaluate everything we do with respect to the climate lens. And although I poke fun at that, it has merit. I only poke fun at that because of my friend across the way. It says that in the report, item 11, it says it'll encourage a greater pedestrian usage of the parkland, make it more accessible, and that's true. Landscaping will also provide further green space and add tree canopy, and that's partly true because I believe the pathway that we create will be more pavement than the house occupies. So I'm not sure that that's a proven fact, and it doesn't speak to what it does for our climate to be sending things like this to the landfill. So, you know, we also look at the fact that it's not occupied now is really neither here nor there. It's two rentable units that we, the municipality, take out of circulation, even though we have demonstrated time and time and again our immense concern for the lack of affordable housing in this community. And in fact, we've sold off a golf course to help pay for same. And I think really, you know, if we're going to have ideals, if we're going to have beliefs, we shouldn't stray from them. And if we think housing is important, we shouldn't tear this building down and lose those 2 units. And if we think replenishing our infrastructure is important, we shouldn't be spending money on this building that we could be spending to rehabilitate a stretch of road like we did on Paris Road in the last month, probably the worst stretch of road in town. And we've got some more just like that would probably cost, I don't know, $500,000 perhaps. You know, I just think that we're not being true to what we seem to believe in if we go ahead with this. And with respect to the Ward 2 councillors, I can understand exactly why this makes sense from the other point of view, but I just can't bring myself to vote for this tonight. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Next up, we have Councillor Martin. Floor is yours.
Thank you. How long has this building been vacant?
Through the chair, it hasn't been very long, I believe, less than a year.
Okay, and do we know what the condition of the building is?
Through the chair, I just did a visual outside. I didn't get inside the building, but it looks like it needs some work. I would say fair condition, fair to poor, or poor to fair, sorry.
Do we know what the last rents charged for the units were?
Through the chair, no, I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay. Thank you. I too won't be supporting this. I see a huge parking problem in the future. When you have access to a park off a city street like this, people end up parking on the street to use this access, and the neighbors are going to be driven crazy. I know with Graham Willens backing behind my house and an access just down the road, when it's soccer season, the street fills up with all the parents' cars of people taking their kids to the soccer game. And I can see this being a problem on Dufferin. And if we're not going to put some parking on this property, then it's just going to make for a terrible situation on that street. And I can't support that. Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Antosky.
He's first time speaker.
Oh, yes. First time. You got me there, Your Worship, Mayor Davis. First time speaker, Mayor Davis.
I don't have you in anything or got you in anything, but I've been listening carefully to all the arguments, and I'd say this, that I think the parking's a bit of a red herring, because there will be an entrance off St. Paul Ave where the parking will be, where other members of the other residents of the city who don't live in the immediate neighborhood that want to use Dufferin Park, they would be parking there. I think it'd be very unlikely to ever even conceive of parking in that narrow area. Plus, probably the residents of that area would not be particularly happy with that. And that's, I think, is indicated by what Ron told us. I agree that having housing and preserving housing is extremely important, but it's like any other decision we make, we're balancing that against other competing priorities. And one thing we have heard from residents as well is make the best use of the parks we have, because there's much to be said for promoting the good and efficient use of our parks. It promotes a very healthy lifestyle, and there's value in and of itself to our community for that. And what is Dufferin Park? I mean, Dufferin Park, it's kind of an unusual park in the sense that it's very long and narrow, with only access really off St. Paul Ave. And frankly, I know the area pretty well, and that back part of Dufferin Park is really not well used. because it's hard to get to from those who would use this park, being the residents of Homedale. And the whole area south of here has kind of morphed. It's a lot of young families who I'm sure it's very important to them and their families to have easy access by walking to a park. And you look at the area south of here, and it isn't really well served by park space. And I'm sure that if this pedestrian access is there, it'll be much better used by the residents in that area. And the back part of Dufferin Park will be, it'll be more top of mind to residents because they'll be able to access it much easier, not have to walk all the way around the block to get in there. And so I don't think we can lose sight of that we want to make best use of our parks and provide the type of access to the neighborhood and the residents in the neighborhood, so they're encouraged, them and their children are encouraged to use the park. And certainly take into account the concerns of the ward councillors, who I know have spoken out quite frequently in favor of protecting our housing stock. But like I said, you can't make your decision making solely based on one principle, even though that's a very important principle. You've got to consider other issues, balancing other considerations, and not lose sight of what this neighborhood is and what it needs and what the families need who live south of this particular property. So I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I will remain also consistent. Green space is important for our families. As a member of FCM, I'm witnessing other municipalities purchasing green space for the families in their community, not just maintaining and keeping what they have, but also purchasing. It is more complicated. There's a building on this, and that's unfortunate. This would be so much easier if it was just a plot of land that we could move forward with this. So this does complicate things, but I think it is an access to a park. We can talk about how wide the path is going in so that we get the best of both worlds, and we can make sure that we're adding to our tree canopy or putting whatever plantings in that we need to. It supports our active transportation focus. It supports our environmental focus. And I disagree that it doesn't add value. It adds great value to the community and to the families that live there. Through COVID, people have rediscovered their parks. They're spending more time. Families have reconnected by being outside and doing free activity. So I think this is important. We need to continue to look at these opportunities for our communities. And as things get more and more expensive, vacations seem to be going to the wayside. So you're having a lot more staycations. And this is a good opportunity for our families, and I hope that we'll support it. And as the mayor said, we have to balance the priorities, and there are many of them. I always look at people first, and I hope that we can have this supported. I wish it was a little bit easier and not as complicated, but I think this is a good start, and I appreciate the need that the ward councillors want this for their community. One more statement is, it is a neighborhood park. It's not a community park. So they are built to encourage people to ride their bikes, to walk to. I live right beside a neighborhood park. I don't own the parking spots in front of my house. I'm quite happy if someone's coming somewhere to use our basketball court to park in front of my house, and I'd love to see them out there using our park. The staff's been doing a great job of redeveloping our parks. Our parks are busy. Now that we're post-COVID almost, I look forward to seeing 50, 60 people out in our park. Some young ones on the playground, some older ones in the basketball court, and the neighbors sitting on the rocks and talking and visiting. So I look forward to those days again, and I'm so glad that we create that and that we continue to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Councillor Jan Vanderstel, second time speaker. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Wall, and a few more questions as well. Is there, okay, so there are plenty of properties in town in almost every ward that don't have driveways. And the buildings, the structures, the houses on those properties are occupied by people who either don't drive or park in an alternative location. Being that we continually talk about not only affordable housing, but attainable housing, has there been any discussion towards turning this into a revenue generator? So you would maintain the structure, do the repairs that are necessary in order to turn it into a revenue generator as far as renting out or leasing out those two rental units, being fully mindful of the fact that it does not come with a driveway, but there is a public path to a parkway. Has any discussions occurred on that, or is that within keeping with the wishes of the seller?
Through the chair, I have not had any discussions with my client group, Engineering Services, in regards to that option. I guess that is something that we can certainly review, but that's the kind of information, in terms of what is going to be needed to bring the property up to property standard or building code standards. I'm going to have to say that it wasn't looked at, but we can certainly look at it. The model that we were using was that we were going to utilize this property for a access into Dufferin Park. Okay, thank you, Ron. And further to that, in what capacity was this part of a 250 meter survey or questionnaire to area residents, whether or not they are all in favor? Presumably, I would assume that the school, pardon me, I would assume that the school would be very much in favor of not having people trespass through their grounds to the park. But have we actually entertained an area survey? I know that the ward councillors are in support of this, and they would have a better handle on that than I certainly would. But do we have a better gauge or better understanding of where people sit with this? Through the chair, no, there wasn't a campaign completed for this, a neighborhood type of circulation. The two abutting properties, as I said earlier, were notified and made aware that there was a potential, the city was looking at this property for an access. But in terms of a larger, wider scope of the area, that has not been completed.
Okay, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstelt. Councillor Rose Sicoli for the second time.
Yes, thank you. So besides the affordable housing piece to this, which I don't think we should lose sight of, by the time we purchase this house, demolish this house, rebuild the lands, this is going to be close to a $1 million pathway. And that just seems like, to me, to be a very irresponsible use of taxpayer money. So the only way that I could support this is if we were exploring retaining this house as part of the city's portfolio of affordable housing units, and somehow seeing if we could, get the best of both worlds with this. So with that, what I think I would like to do, and I'm seeking a seconder, is to defer this decision, and I'll look to you for guidance on this, Mr. Chair. I would like to defer this decision and have staff come back to us with more information on how we could better use this parcel of land. And I think I see Jan seconding that, Councillor.
Okay, so seconded. So I did see Councillor McCreary with his hand up first, though I apologize.
An amendment before the deferral.
Okay, so there's an amendment being proposed before your deferral, Councillor Sicoli, if that's okay? You're good with that? Okay. I don't see any other speakers. Now, Councillor McCreary, you've already spoken twice, so just the amendment, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your attention to detail. I have a number of amendments. The first one would be for staff to produce in time for council a report on potential uses for the building if we retain it.
Do you have a seconder? Okay, I see Councillor Brian Van Tilburg. So the first amendment is to have staff provide a report before council about,
Potential reuses of the building.
okay? Any commentary or discussion on the amendment? Councillor Antosky?
Just a question to staff. Do we have time constraints in terms of how long this offer is offered to the city before they want to go to market?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question. The estate is, wanting to dispose of this property to clear the estate. So always incorporate a due diligence period within our agreements, purchase and sale. I would anticipate, we're going to get agreement with a due diligence period of probably 30 to 60 days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Any other speakers to Councillor McCreary's amendment? Okay, let's vote.
The amendment carries on a recorded vote of 9-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall. Those against, Councillor Celeste.
Okay, the motion is now amended and everybody gets a new speaking opportunity or two. I don't see any other speakers except for Councillor McCreary. So Councillor McCreary, you're going to propose another amendment, or well, it's your time. Do what you want. Respectfully.
Well, I've never had a chair say that to me before. Thank you, Chair Wall. My second amendment would be for staff to prepare for our council meeting a total estimate of the total cost of the pathway project.
Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin seconds it. So the motion is on the floor to have staff provide a cost estimate for the pathway project prior to council.
Mr. Chair, if I may just comment on the amendment.
You may.
I believe it was Councillor Secoli, and I may be wrong, but I believe Councillor Secoli made reference to the total cost of the project. And I'm reminded of the old Western adage about buffaloes going over a cliff. The purchase price of the house is the first buffalo, but I'd like to know the complete tally of who's going to end up at the bottom of the cliff in time for council so that we can make an informed decision. This being the phase one of what's something larger project, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Your amendment is on the floor, seconded by Councillor Martin. I don't see any conversation or raised hands. Okay, we're going to vote on the amendment.
The amendment to 712 carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Celeste, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Okay, now everyone gets a speaking opportunity once again, and the first up is Councillor Dan McCreary.
I have another amendment, Mr. Chair.
Go for it.
And this amendment would be for staff to provide a listing of other capital projects that could advance to the 2022 build season of a value similar to this one.
Do you have a seconder? I see Councillor Martin.
And Mr. Chair, if I may?
You may.
Within the context of our total annual spend and our commitment to various other things in the community, it might be worthwhile to see how this stacks up against other projects to advance into this year, just as we decide every year during our estimates committee meetings how we're going to spend our capital for this year, next year, and the years that follow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Antosky, first time speaker to the amended motion.
Just clarification from staff, because I understand the idea here, but I think I heard that we don't have capacity to move any further projects forward, but if I heard that incorrectly, I'd like some confirmation or clarification, please.
Through the chair to Councillor Antosky. So Jennifer mentioned this as well, is that this is an opportunity that we have on an existing project to provide this access. It's not a new project that we're introducing, one that wasn't in the capital budget. So there really isn't another project. The funds are coming from a reserve to fund this opportunity. So we wouldn't be adding any projects to the capital nor are we taking any projects away. This is just staff assigned to this project. This would become part of that project if approved.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any hands. Nobody in the room. Oh, I do see a hand. Councillor Jan Vanderstel, First Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I just need some clarification. The comparative study between a capital project worth 6.5 million. Sorry, 650,000, or the comparative study of $1 million. I would like to seek direction from the mover of the amendment for clarity on that.
Councillor McCurry, can you provide clarification on that?
Yes, the answer to Councillor Vanderstel's question is yes to both. And it was a good point to raise that the amendment should be provided in the amount of the acquisition price and also in the amount of the total capital add to the Dufferin Park.
Consider it friendly. Thank you.
Just less, if you'll indulge me as the chair for just a moment. Staff, I believe, have some concerns with the amendment, and I'm wondering if staff could clarify their concerns with the amendment so I can make a decision.
To the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. Just to be clear, this is a report about the acquisition of one property. And we have, I believe, an amendment to the amendment asking for a review of capital projects more generally. And the concern is that that may not be material to the main motion that's on the floor. Also, the information being requested to be brought back by council, which would be in the form of a supplemental memorandum to the main report rather than a referral back to staff. A referral is typically the mechanism by which you obtain additional information from staff. If the amendments get too extensive, the staff will not be able to bring that information back in time for council because it will take additional time.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Heidi. So Councillor McCrary, I believe that last amendment regarding reviewing capital projects, did you perhaps want to try rewording it, or I might remove it from the floor?
The general manager makes a valid point with respect to availability of time for staff. So all with the permission of the seconder, we'll take that off the floor.
Excellent. So we will remove that temporarily from the floor on the excellent advice of Heidi. Thank you, Heidi. So now speaking to the amended amendment, but no current amendment, Councillor Celeste, would you like to speak?
I'm not sure because I'm not sure what I'm speaking to now.
So we have amended the motion twice, once to have a report come back regarding costs and comparisons, and then once, yeah. Julia could probably tell you better.
I'd appreciate hearing those.
Sorry, through the chair. So what's before, you're wondering what's before the committee at this time?
Can you tell me the two amendments that have been approved and what's on the floor now, please?
Sure. So through the chair, the amendment, the first amendment was for staff to produce a report on potential uses for the building if it is retained. The second being staff to prepare a total estimate of a total cost of the pathway project. And then, so the motion is in regards to the acquisition of the property with those two amendments at this time.
Are there timelines attached to those?
They would be subsequent memos back to council is what was requested from Councillor McCreary.
By when?
Council.
By council.
This month.
Okay, and I'm looking at the general manager. I don't know whether that's doable. Having heard what I just heard, perhaps we could get more enlightened.
I have multiple mics here. So through the chair, in terms of an internal circulation, so again, just to be clear, this report is being brought to this committee because our client department in Public Works had determined that they may need this property as an expansion of an existing capital project. If there is a desire for this committee to seek additional information through a general real estate circulation, which is what we do when we are generally looking at properties, we can absolutely do that. We would need to ensure that our friends in our other commissions are able to get back to us in time. I'm thinking specifically about housing. I don't think that will be a problem in the 2-week period that we have prior to council, with some indulgence from the city clerk to make sure we can get that memo to you on time. The larger issue was the more extensive review of capital projects, and that would be far too little time to complete that in.
Okay, having heard that, I'm just getting concerned. We're piling stuff on here that basically will break its back and nothing will happen. And I can't support any of that because I think it's something that should move forward. So that's why I voted against the First Amendment. It's bogging down a process that either you agree with the process or you disagree with the process, but don't try and send it down some unnamed street, because that doesn't work. So I guess we are where we are, but what I would prefer is if we could just have either voted up or voted down, but don't vote to send it to outer space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Speaking for the 12th time, Councillor McCreary.
I believe it was 11, but I just wanted to, through the chair, I just wanted to raise a point of order that I was raised by a constituent, wondering why we're negotiating a real estate transaction in public rather than in camera.
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. City staff at times recommend that certain reports are discussed in closed session, and that is typically under the heading of acquisition or disposition of interest in land under the Municipal Act. We are permitted to do so, and we typically do that where there is a competitive process at play. In this case, what you have is a property owner who has approached the city. This is not a property that's currently actively being marketed on the general market, and it's not a discussion, that would in any way impact the city's negotiating position with respect to the purchase of these lands.
So that trumps the fact that the potential seller is an identifiable individual.
Through the chair, you could obtain that information from the Land Registry Office. That's not information that's personal information under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
We knew that. Just checking. Folks watching at home know. And I would say this. I do believe we lose the clubhouse at the Dufferin Tennis Club. Perhaps the staff are looking at some potential reuse for the structure that we seem eager to acquire. Perhaps there may be some use that staff could consider for that structure that might be of benefit to the users of the site. If that could, I don't mean to amend it, but staff now have that hint. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's no further hands raised, no speakers in the room. We're going to vote on the amended motion.
This is the main motion and will pass. Is that what I understand?
I can't tell you whether or not it will pass, but I can definitely tell you that that's what we're voting on.
That would be done. So I thought there was a deferral on the floor.
Sorry, Councillor Sokoli had put down her hand. Councillor Sokoli, are you intending on moving your deferral?
You know what, I would be satisfied if I could see these numbers before passing this through at council. So I will remove my deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Sokoli. Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. We are now voting.
Item 7.1.2, acquisition of 159 Dufferin Avenue as amended, carries on recorded vote of 7-3. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sokoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Celeste, Antosky, and Wall. Those against, Councillors Van Tilburg, Martin, and McCreary.
Excellent. Next up on the agenda is item 7.1.7, update on measures to address graffiti. It was separated by, I believe, Councillor Utley. And I'm going to temporarily hand over the floor to Mayor Davis to chair, and I'll be right back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, hang on.
Oh,
I have
I saw the red light and that was my
Well,
cue.
Councillor Utley, you asked for this matter to be separated. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd forgotten I'd done that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a comment here that, I feel for the owners of private property who have their properties vandalized. And the property owner or the building owner becomes a double, triple victim in this situation. Their property has been defaced. Then they're charged with the task of cleaning it themselves or disguising it or having a professional come in and clean the graffiti. And then the third thing is the cost associated with that. And I feel really uncomfortable that someone that's been victimized becomes victimized again. And I'm not sure what the solution is to this problem or this scourge throughout our city. And I'm looking for ideas. I really would like staff to look at what's being done in other countries, other cities where, they try and minimize the amount of graffiti on their properties and in their communities. And I just wanted to make that comment that there's a lot of unfairness, I think, with this situation. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Anybody in here? Anybody in the chamber? No. Okay. Councillor Van Tilburg.
It certainly is a double-edged sword for anybody living with property that gets tagged with graffiti, because then it's the city that comes after them. Basically, is saying it's your fault that you've gotten your building tagged. It's something that the Downtown Task Force Committee has been going over and working through, and I'm hoping that we can come forward with a resolution that can create a fund that businesses and buildings could tap into in order to clean up the graffiti that happens. My question for staff, going through the report, people may get charged with the vandalism, but is there any sort of fine or damages that can ever be accrued that could go into such a fund, as I was just trying to allude to, that would then fix the damages that have happened? Is that's not really referenced in the report? And is there any possibilities for something like that?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, Jill Binkley, Manager of Property Standards and Bylaw. That is certainly something that staff could look into. We could see if other municipalities have established such a fund and how they've done it, and work with our legal representatives as well.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Chair Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis, for assuming the role of chair. You do it so well. Okay, I don't have any speakers queued up. I don't see any speakers in the room. I don't see any hands up online. Julia, did I miss anything? We are going to vote on this item.
Item 7.1.7, update on measures to address graffiti, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sepoli, Vanderstel Utley, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, Wall, noting Councillor Celeste was out of the room at the time of the vote.
Moving right along, item 7.1.8, Police Station Task Force Report 2022-02-28 regarding Brantford Police Service Facility Redevelopment Project Overview, separated by Councillor Greg Martin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the items in this report includes looking at alternatives for the police station. And one of the alternatives utilizes the parking garage, and it would require demolition of about half of the parking garage, losing half the parking spaces. And I think the costs associated with doing the repairs to the remainder of the garage and the loss of parking would be a huge problem. So I'd like to amend this report by taking out option number 2 and changing clause B to consider the 3 locations. And I see Councillor Vanderstelt is seconding this, who's also on this committee. This is something that would be a waste of staff's time because I don't see this going forward at all. And there's no sense in investigating, doing any more work in looking into this particular alternative because I don't see any way possible for that to be put forward as a viable alternative for this project. So if we can make this amendment, it'll save some staff time. Thank you.
Okay, lots of speakers in the room now. Thank you. So moved by yourself, seconded by Councillor Vanderstelt, a close second to Councillor Mary Davis. Okay, first speaker in the room, Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, this is probably going to be a heated agreement all around. Perhaps it might be worth asking the original mover and seconder if it's friendly.
Is this a friendly amendment? Great, no objection. Is there anyone who would like to object to this being friendly? There you go. Okay, so it's a friendly amendment. The motion is now amended. So speaking opportunities, first up, Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you for letting me retain the floor. The committee is embarking on some pretty interesting work. We've, for the benefit of those not on the committee, we've examined the Collier's report, which looks at a number of criteria, some of which have changed since the time the report was done. It also looks at space requirements, some of which have changed since the study was done. So there's a fresh group of eyes on the project. We are looking at a number of other downtown sites, and Councillor Martin and I we're the chair and vice chair, and we're provided with a drawing today showing a number of downtown sites that we'll get staff to comment on, and that'll be viewed by this committee next time the steering committee makes its report here. So there's a lot of good work that's being done. The committee is determined to produce a building which the community can be very proud of, which the community can afford, and which will satisfy the needs of our tenant, the Brantford Police, who will be providing the type of policing that this community needs and wants in future. So it's a positive story for the community, Mr. Chair, and there's a lot more good news to come out of our little steering committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Next up, Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Wall. This is one of those projects that somehow feels like we've been talking about for decades. And my apologies, I just found an attachment that I missed earlier on review, but if staff could possibly provide just a very brief overview. My recollection is that we had already kind of investigated, different locations, whether we were going to split the police station out, whether we were going to use the existing location. And so I guess I just need a reminder as to why we're back here again, because I thought we had already kind of been down that path, which is how we ended up with looking at renovating the current location. So can someone on staff help me with that, please? Sorry, Brian, I know you haven't been here for decades.
Is Brian taking that? I can't see.
Andy, you can take it if you want, so I can answer where you can take it, please.
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Councillor Antosky. So that is true. We were at that point, but we got an estimate that was about almost 15 million over the budget that was approved. So it was important for us to have a look again as to how to bring this project back into scope. So that is why we presented a report to the committee, the Police Task Force Committee, to just to provide other alternatives to bring this cost back down into what was budgeted.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Indy. And certainly I'm not opposed to, looking at what we consider now the downtown, but we may want to consider that it may not be central once all of our build out is done with our expanded land acquisition. So that would be in the back of my mind, but I do think that there's probably some good options in various different areas of the town. And thanks for clarification, Indy, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Mayor Kevin Davis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And there is a lot of confusion about this, but I think Mr. Hutchings, Mr. Hans, I think accurately described what happened, but this doesn't have a decades-long history. I mean, this police station, the current building is only was opened, I think, in 1989 or 1990. So it's not that old a building. But what has become clear with the growth of the community and the increasing demand and the change in policing services, the building had clearly become inadequate. And so this was really driven at the Police Services Board 2 years ago. There was a consultant that was retained. The consultant looked at various locations, including, for example, what is now Old City Hall, and it was determined that could not be accommodated or changed to meet the needs of the policing services. And it was determined that the cheapest option was an addition to the current building at $39 million. And it actually is a good location in the sense that you're quite right, Councillor Antosky, with this shift northward from Shellard Lane for the future growth of the community, north of Powerline Road, the geographic center of this community is going to be pretty much in kind of that area where the police station currently is. And of course, it's right on a major artery where will have fairly quick and rapid access to almost every area of the city. So there's a lot to be said for that location in terms of policing efficiencies. But what happened was once the consultant architect got into the detailed planning, the cost went from 39 to about 58 million estimated. And so it was determined by myself and some other councillors, led by Councillor McCurry, who brought forward the motion that we as a council needed to become involved, to take a second look at the locations, to take a second look at what actually is being proposed that needs to be included in a police station, to make sure that we're providing value to the taxpayers, but also a building that's fully functional, efficient, and meets the needs of our police services. And so we thought there was a need to bring in, I guess, a second set of eyes about 2 years later to look at what's being done, how it's being done, to make sure all of the available options are very thoroughly canvassed, including, as come up, is it possible to do something in the downtown that has some spin-off benefits for the downtown? So I think it's a very useful process that will drive value and benefit for the taxpayer. Hopefully a building that better meets the needs of the police service now and into the next 2 or 3 decades as this community grows, and secondarily meets other needs and interests of the city. So, but I totally agree that once we had taken a look at the parking garage, it didn't really make sense. You'd have to tear down half of it, and you'd lose a lot of the parking that is in fact used there, particularly by residents in the area of the Beckett building. And so once we took a second look at that, it was clear it wasn't feasible. So I think it's a really very good constructive process. I just hope it doesn't get dragged out too long. Let's make some good decisions. And this report does tell you we are looking at a number of different options, and there are probably a few more that we'll take a look at as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Up next in the queue, Councillor John Slice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can staff remind me of the approved budget for this project?
Lisa? Through you, Mr. Chair, Brian Hutching, CEO, the approved budget for this project is 39 million.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. And I guess I'll ask an open-ended question, and perhaps fellows that are on the task force can maybe respond once they get an opportunity to speak. I'm just wondering, are we looking at redeveloping as one of the options, redeveloping the existing site and looking at a storefront satellite downtown that would house beat officers that would, and by beat, I mean folks walking a beat, as well as the special constables that will be starting work soon. I just wonder if that's one of the options that have been plugged in. I don't think there'd be any capital downtown. It would be basically lease space or a storefront, but a focal point where law enforcement would be housed in the downtown area. I would ask that question. Hopefully somebody can answer that for me. And I guess the other would be, I think we're using the right process in the sense that we're taking ownership of this and we're keeping a handle on funding, because we know what happens when that doesn't happen, and it's not a good ending. So I think that part is good. My concern with what's going on currently is that the longer this gets dragged out, the more zeros are going to be added onto this price tag. So we have to get on this quickly because things are not going down, they're going up. So I would hope that folks would be looking at a timeline that's fairly condensed, and also looking at that option. I didn't see an option in here that said we would redevelop and then lease or whatever, create a storefront in the downtown area to house walking beat officers and the special constables that are coming on stream later this year. So hopefully during the course of this discussion, that can be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Okay, so there are no further first-time speakers in the room. First-time speaker on Zoom, Councillor Jan Vanderstel.
You know, I'll tell you, it's procedurally a horrible position to be in at home here virtually, because most of the wind is taken out of my sails by all the other comments to go first, all the other questions. It's a nightmare for me. At any rate, one of the things that was alluded to, but not clearly mentioned, was the necessity of this process to identify the proper location for our expansion of police services in one of our buildings for 25 to 30 years into the future. It's important that we bear in mind where the growth will happen, where the density will occur. And I applaud Councillor McCreary for forming this oversight committee, because I think it's necessary by a simple process of elimination of I'm not going to say irresponsible locations, but less than likely or less than effective locations. I think it's necessary in the process early on, and this is just part of the process. I second this because it became clear in the very beginning that the prospect of having to tear out part of an existing parking garage, it's not cost effective. It simply isn't, especially when you compare it to the other options of the stratified approach to community policing and cutting back on some of the possible programs that would have been found in the new location, and dispersing those throughout the community, and making sure that we keep a clear and present eye on those costs and keep them under control rather than play catch up later, which was the case with the Gretzky build or rebuild. There was insufficient timelines for that bill. Now I think we've gone about this in a credible and a cautious fashion, and I'm glad to be involved, and I'm glad to second this. I agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Second time speaker in the room, Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in response to a concern about having a downtown facility for downtown beat patrol, actually what my understanding the service has in mind is, remember the chief has this concept of stratified coordinated policing where Laurier Security working with the downtown beat patrol, working with our stationary and mobile security for city properties. And the proposal, the concept to begin with is that the downtown beat patrol would be using the Laurier private security facility that they have in the Laurier campus downtown. And it's probably a pretty good idea. It's cost effective and probably will generate a closer degree of cooperation and coordination between the downtown beat patrol and Laurier Security, which is one of the intended objects. So in response to the concerns about timing, I agree with that concern, which is, so you're gonna go back and study this, and if this goes on for a year and a half, you know, construction costs increase, and is it really necessary? And I think, I can't speak for the chair, but I think the rest of us members really do want to move through this relatively quickly. There's already been a lot of work done on where a police station should go and what our options are. It's really a question of updating that and making sure we've thoroughly considered all of the options, both in terms of the cost savings for the taxpayer, but also so the committee can have some confidence that we've taken a really good hard look at it again for probably about the third time, just to make sure that the decision-making is right up to date and in keeping and responding to all of the changed circumstances in our community that have occurred the last time this was looked at about a year and a half ago by the Police Service Board. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Next up in the queue, Councillor Greg Martin for the second time. The floor is all yours.
Actually, it's first time I spoke to the amendment before, but the mayor's addressed a number of issues I wanted to discuss. The Laurier, I believe, already have a storefront for their special constables, and we're hoping to work out a deal to utilize that space in conjunction with them, because that'll be a wonderful way for the two organizations to merge their special constables and have them work effectively together. The one problem with the current building, which isn't very old, is that it wasn't designed with expansion in mind. So unfortunately, it's not really an easy building to expand on. We can't just put a second floor on it. It wasn't designed for that. And the cost to put a second floor on that building is prohibitive. And we were stuck with looking for a new site until it became available that we could buy some land off our neighbor, the gas company there, because they're not utilizing their property to its fullest extent. And they're willing to sell us a portion of that. And what they're willing to sell us will be enough for us to put an addition on the existing building. And it's going to be done in a smart way in that we're going to make it so that there is room for expansion in the future, so that as the city grows and the police force needs to grow, we can expand that station so that we can get our money's worth out of it by having it expandable and usable for a much longer period. So I think what you're going to see in the end is the existing location is going to be expanded upon, and we'll be working out a deal with Laurier for a downtown location for our beat patrol and special constables, and hopefully that works out well in our favor, and we can see that add some enforcement to the downtown that's unfortunately needed. And I think this is going to be a good project in the long run. Hopefully we can keep the costs under control and see a good project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Otley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you look at our fire services, they're spread out in the community so they can react faster to emergencies. And I hope that the task force will consider looking at one or two other locations in the city as our city expands, to operate everything from one site. It may be easier administratively to to do that, but are we serving the community in the way that we should be? So I think it's great that we consider having a downtown station for the beat, and to immediately react to criminal acts as they happen in the downtown area. But I think it's something that's worth exploring. I think criminals and the public react better and feel safer if the police services are close by. I don't know what the cost of that would be, or how it would be administered, but I think all in all, the public safety has to come first, and our service to the public needs to be strongly considered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. Well, prior speakers mentioned the word quickly several times. And if I recall what quickly got us at Gretzky Center, it was building well designing. And that was very expensive. And Councillor Martin and I could both show you where things started out and ended up, and they were two different places up there. So quickly can be viewed as more cost effective, provided quickly is done correctly. The committee will do things correctly, period. And we have to settle on a site, and the geography of the boundaries of the city is not the same as the geographies of the areas most frequently served by the Brantford Police Service. So the geographic center of our city is not the geographic center of the most frequently patrolled and called to areas. And policing no longer is a matter of patrol officers going to and from the station. I believe largely what we do now is voice to text communication, and a lot of what's done is done from the car. So the geography isn't the old kind of geography. It's and that's one of the reasons we're looking at alternate sites. So we have a need to move forward on this in a judicious fashion, not a fast fashion. We're going to reevaluate site selection. Some of the criteria have changed. Some of the criteria members of the committee were quite interested to learn of in terms of how the present site was situated. One of them, in fact, was a desire to locate next to restaurants and hotels so that the Brantford Police Service could more properly entertain folks coming from away for some reason. That's something the committee has revisited. It's about line 17 in the Collier's report for those following at home. So there's a number of things that have changed. The space needs have changed considerably. When one looks at the lessons we've learned with this building and the number of people we were able to accommodate in here on a per square foot basis, there are some lessons that the committee will learn from our experience here. So I'm pleased to see that we have everybody's support. We're going to proceed in a judicious, careful, cautious fashion to do, as I said at the outset, to provide a building that we can all be very, very proud of, to provide a building that meets the needs of our budgetary constraints, to provide a building that meets the needs of our community, and to provide a building that meets the needs of our primary tenant, which is the Brantford Police Service.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. So seeing no other speakers, I'm going to take an opportunity to say a few words about this because I've been thinking about whether or not I would. So we now currently sit in a building that cost a lot of money. And it was very contentious in the community, and there were many conversations and discussions that were had about it, hours and hours and hours and hours and years of conversations and discussions about it. And anybody who was following it knew that I came on at the end, and because of the opinions of some members of the people I represent, I didn't necessarily support the building we're sitting in today. Then I walked in the front door for the first time, and I was given a tour. And I was shown around at the technological marvel that this building is. It is a place that is conducive of good governance. It is a place that is conducive of doing business. It is a place that is a good working environment. It is marvelous. Do I support how much money we spent on it? No, I still don't think I would have, but I know now that it needed to be done because this is the future of our city. This is our city hall and we should be proud of it. I think the same thing about our police station. I am a large supporter and advocate for our police service in this community. And I want nothing more than to support Chief Davis and his team on providing good policing for our community. And I know that they will do policing well, and they should have every resource that they need to be able to do it. And that means having a space that is purpose-built. And if we're going to do this, let's do it right. There is no need to rush. There is an urgency, but urgent things like policing should be taken with caution and precaution, and there should be many conversations and discussions because at the end of the day, the taxpayer does have to float this bill, and we have to be frugal with how we spend our money. I support the police. I support a new police station, and I hope that whatever we end up at the end, it is 1/10 as great as the building that we are currently sitting in that I mentioned I did not support originally. I have a question, if I may, myself, through me, to staff, to anybody who can answer. Who's our expert on police stations? Like, what are we thriving for? Where's the best police station around us? And then, are we doing that? Because we should do that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to you. The architectural firm we've hired is, there's only two in North America that do this sorts of work. They are the experts in this work. They've done a number of buildings in the various communities that are state of the art. So if you're heading to Niagara Falls or go along the 420, you'll see the big Niagara region one. They built that, as well as many others in Ontario and as well as US. So we're relying on their expertise, as well as some experience of some of our staff we have that have built police stations in the past.
And then we have this task force of which or committee that I supported. Who's our policing expert on this?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, the police expert on it is the police chief, and as well as the deputy chief sit on the committee, reports to the committee as well as the city staff. It's a joint effort.
I mean, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't support this then. So unless there are any other further speakers, at the end of the day, I think we'd all agree policing is very important, and I hope that this isn't unanimous. Let's vote.
Item 7.1.8 Police Station Task Force Report regarding Brantford Police Services Facility Redevelopment Project Overview with the friendly amendment carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Vanderseld, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Okay, there are no more separated items. So we move into resolutions, and I would like to ask Councillor Cheryl Antosky if she would mind taking the chair so I may introduce a motion.
Absolutely no problem at all. Councillor Wall, I understand you have a resolution that you would like to move.
Yes, thank you very much. Moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Davis. I see his support. Okay. 8.1 salvage yard expanded licensing. Whereas sections 9, 10, 11, and 151 of the Municipal Act 2001 permits municipalities to provide for a system of licenses with respect to businesses and further permits municipalities to impose conditions as a requirement of obtaining, continuing to hold, or receiving a business license. And whereas the Corporation of the City of Brantford licenses certain businesses pursuant to Chapter 326 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, and whereas salvage yards in the city are licensed under Chapter 326 of the City City of Brantford Municipal Code. And whereas Brantford Police Service have reported that the theft of salvaged goods is an ongoing issue in the City of Brantford, and whereas there are numerous reasons and mitigating circumstances that may be a contributing factor to theft or other crimes within our community, and whereas the City of Brantford makes a significant investment in social services, including income support, homelessness, and housing programs, in addition to providing streamlined referrals to other community services. And whereas one of the common motivators of this crime is the ease in which stolen product can be sold to salvage yards for quick cash, and whereas salvage yards are licensed by the City of Brantford and must adhere to a number of regulations, which includes maintaining a digitized registry. And whereas, despite efforts to regulate salvage yards through Chapter 326 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, crime continues to be an issue in our community. And whereas the City of Brantford deems it to be in the public interest, having regard to both public health and safety and nuisance control to reduce crime in relation to scrap metal, now therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to collect feedback from community partners and other relevant stakeholders, including the Brantford Police Service, neighborhood associations, the Brantford Chamber of Commerce, and to engage the public through a Let's Talk Brantford campaign that investigates expanding salvage yard licensing to include those whom sell scrap, and that staff be directed to investigate expanding salvaging yard license, including financial and human resource costs associated with the implementation, and to report back to this council with potential amendments to Chapter 326 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code to further regulate the sale of goods through salvage yards, including without limitation provisions to address the seller of goods at salvage yards. And if I may, Chair Antosky, speak to this item.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay. So that was very long, but essentially, we have a serious issue in our community with stolen scrap metal. Serious. You might ask me how serious, Councillor Wall. Thousands of reports of stolen scrap metal in our community just over the last couple of years. Thousands with a T. We got to do something about this. Head out into my ward, mine and Councillor Van Tilborg's ward. You'll see power boxes ripped open, power lines, houses broken into, air conditionings ripped off of the museum in the downtown core, a museum, a place designed to preserve our history. Air conditioner ripped off, ripped apart, and that stuff just taken and sold. I've been in constant communication with the Brantford Police about this, and this council made a really great decision to make it so that people who were buying scrap metal had to say, where'd you get this scrap metal from? And that happened. That's already in existence. But even though that already exists, thousands of reports of scrap metal being stolen in this community from the people who live in this community. We got to do something. So I'll get a little animated, I'm sorry, but this has nothing to do with punishing people who are stealing scrap metal. You think anybody wants to be stealing scrap metal? No, something happened in their life that they are now left. That's what they got to do. They got to steal scrap metal for money for whatever reason. And I spoke with social services and I spoke with our team here, and it's a part of the resolution. We want to help those people, right? Nobody wants to see somebody getting arrested, going to jail, being punished. We want to help people. So this whole resolution is about making it so that if you want to sell scrap metal, you better be able to validate and verify where you got the scrap metal from. Because if there was nobody buying stolen scrap metal, then there'd be no reason to steal scrap metal. All I'm saying is if you had to walk into City Hall and say, hey, I'm a guy who sells scrap metal, can I have a $20 license? Here's my ID and my business number and whatever. I don't know what the process is. I know that our staff will figure it out. And then you went down to sell that scrap metal, and not only did the person who was selling it, but the person who was buying it have to validate that that wasn't stolen from a senior citizen in my neighborhood? What's wrong with that? If we make it deliberately difficult to sell scrap metal, hopefully we can prevent the sale of scrap metal, like stolen scrap metal. Nothing wrong with selling scrap metal that's actually completely legitimate when you're doing like a rental project or whatever. So I'm sorry, but I'm not saying we should do this. I'm saying we should investigate doing this. And I'm hoping that if we make it hard to sell stolen scrap metal, then people won't steal scrap metal. I'm going to stop repeating myself now. So I want to thank the Brantford Police Service for all their help in providing the information about this. I want to ensure that this has absolutely nothing to do with punishing people who are trying to sell metal and everything to do with just preventing it from happening. I want to thank our social services for all the stuff that they do to help people so that they don't have to steal. And I want to thank the people in my ward who've been putting up with it for this long. And I'm hoping that this will make a dent. I hope it'll stop it entirely, because I don't think anybody's going to steal scrap metal and drive out of town to sell it. It's not how it works. Okay. I might have more to say later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Utley, I believe, is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that the mover and seconder take this as a very small friendly amendment. At the end of A, it says include those whom sell scrap. They're also buying stolen goods. And if we insert the word whom buy and sell scrap, if that would be acceptable.
No, I won't, because this is designed to deal with those, they don't buy and sell scrap. They sell scrap. They steal it and they sell it.
So no, not friendly?
No, not friendly.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my small amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Anyone else in chambers? I don't believe so. Oh, I'm sorry.
Look to your
Mayor,
left.
right next to the left, sorry.
Yeah, I'm very, thank you, Madam Interim Ad hoc Chair. This is for those of us who live in wards 4 and 5 in certain areas, in fact, we see it in various parts of the city. And I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Wall said in introducing his resolution, which I think is very effective. And we've gone at this once already, and it was really more about dealing with those who receive scrap dealers, if you want to call them that. And became pretty clear that we needed to do more, and we had to do something in respect to those, let's say it frankly, who steal and then sell scrap. The trick will be, and the challenge will be, there are people though who, because of their life circumstances, they do supplement their incomes through collecting scrap and doing it legitimately, and then selling it to a scrap dealer. And it can be hard for those people who do that. They may not have access to a computer, and it's challenging for them to meet strict licensing regulations. So the challenge will be in protecting those who legitimately collect scrap and sell it legitimately, and distinguishing those from those who don't do it legitimately, and making sure that we have a system that tries to control that type of behavior and regulate it. So it's certainly, I thought when I first saw this resolution, I thought, yeah, this really does address kind of the heart of the problem we're seeing in many parts of the community. And just because it might be difficult to strike that right balance doesn't mean you don't try and take a good hard look at it. So I commend Councillor Wall for bringing this forward. And we spent a lot of time on it in terms of the wording, and I was happy to provide some very minimal assistance in moving it forward. So thank you, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we need to be careful with this, because if we make it too hard for people to sell scrap metal, you'll see a reduction in the amount of metal being recycled. What we have to remember is this is a recycling program that works very well. Unfortunately, people steal what is not scrap and sell it as scrap. And there's mechanisms in place to deal with that. We just need to get better at that instead of trying to make it harder on the people that are selling the scrap. So I'm not sure that I'll support what comes from this, but I will support investigating it to see what does come back. But I think staff need to be very careful in what they do bring back, because if you make it too hard, you're gonna discourage recycling something that is very successful right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. All right, we've got no one else in chambers. Thank you, Julia. We've got Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Chair Antosky, Acting Chair. Look, this is the next logical step. And I looked at, and I certainly had some of the concerns that Councillor Martin brings forward. But this is what needs to be looked into. So I certainly hope that he supports this as we go and have staff look into ways to address the manipulations that happen. I got a feeling that we're always going to be adjusting and correcting the things that we do, as those who have to react to the things that we do adjust. Because a thief or a criminal doesn't follow the laws, and they always find the ways to get around them. So there are people that legitimately go out there and have been for decades supporting themselves with a scrap income. And quite frankly, they complain to me because let's just say that there's a lot of competition out there for the metals that they used to wander the streets to collect, to put a roof over their head and food in their belly. And that comes from professional thieves, and it comes from those that might have other issues that they see crimes of opportunity, and everybody gets painted with the same brush. So in order to regulate this without creating a barrier to those that are doing a legitimate service, this has to be looked into by staff. Because what you're doing is you're creating what we'll call a seller, but somebody will probably sell to the seller. I mean, look, there's always going to be a way. So I've had some conversations with staff about this resolution, and I'm very confident that they are very competent in looking at this issue and addressing it, and with what they'll come back to us as recommendations. I would hope that possibly when they're doing the engagement, that they don't just limit the recommendations to some of the things that are listed here, because maybe some of the things that are listed here won't be feasible. But there's a lot of input that they're asking from the community that this resolution directs to. And I would like to know that those things that may come forward can be brought to us so that we can then implement them. So all in all, there's a lot of money in scrap metal. Councillor Wall is not incorrect when he's saying that it is like it's in the thousands. And when we're watching boxes and just everything and anything get ripped apart for quick cash. And I honestly right now don't know where they're taking it, because we do have a registration system. I don't know whether they're beating the system or whether they're going out of town with it, probably both. But there's so much of it happening. This is a cottage industry that we need to get control over. I believe this is one of the tools to do it. So I'll be supporting this. I appreciate my ward mate and the mayor for bringing this forward. And that is all.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Antosky, and I'm going to tone it down. I just have a couple of thank yous I'd like to make before we vote on this. So first and foremost, this was not my idea. I am a conduit through which this idea flows, and it was brought together by the person who brought me the idea, then conversations with Brantford Police. This has been in the works for months. This wasn't something that was just came up overnight, and I just want to thank staff for their patience, for the many emails and conversations. I don't know what the answer is, right? I just want to stop scrap metal from getting stolen in the neighborhoods in our community and make a dent in it. So thank you to every person who put a hand on this, and I look forward to the discussion based upon the results. And Mayor Davis, thank you for seconding it, for getting this on the floor, and I hope for your support. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm really sorry I would have let you go last. I just have a quick comment, so I don't want to stomp on your thank yous. That was great. I want to echo some of the same concerns I have as Councillor Martin. I don't want to, stop recycling, and also the Just to keep a look on, how do we prove the negative? How, if I come in with with an air conditioner, for instance, or recycling, how do I prove it came from my house? Or how do I prove I didn't steal something? So support this wholeheartedly. I agree something has to be done. It's a tricky one. So thank you for all the work that you've done on that. I see no further hands, and so we'll go to the vote.
Item 8.1, salvage yard expanded licensing is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Vanderstel, Etley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Thank you. I'll hand it back to you, Chair Wall.
Thank you very much, Councillor Antosky, for taking the chair. 8.2, joint and several liability. Mayor Davis, 8.2, that's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a little bit technical, but it's still very significant to not only our city, but many other cities and towns and townships across the province. So I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Etley. Just going to write your name in here as the seconder. So settle in, it's a little long. Whereas many municipalities across Ontario, including the corporation city of Brantford, have experienced very significant increases in the cost of insurance, and not just 5%, but as much as 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%. Whereas a significant driver of insurance costs for municipalities across Ontario is joint and several liability, a legal concept which allows a claimant to recover financial compensation from a party in excess of that party's proportionate legal responsibility for an injury. I'll explain that later. Whereas in 2018, Premier Ford committed to reviewing the issue of joint and several liability. And whereas that review was conducted in 2019 with participation from various interested parties, including the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and whereas the results of the provincial review have not been released to the public and the provincial government has not taken any meaningful action to help reduce insurance costs for municipalities across Ontario, including but not limited to eliminating joint and several liability. And whereas to help advance the policy conversation and advocate for the elimination of joint and several liability, Ontario AMO submitted a position paper to the provincial government titled Towards a Reasonable Balance Addressing Growing Municipal Liability Insurance Costs. And whereas the AMO position paper included 7 straightforward recommendations to help reduce the constantly increasing costs for municipalities. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Council of the Corporation City of Brantford supports 7 recommendations contained in the AMO position paper titled Towards a Reasonable Balance Addressing Growing Municipal Liability and Insurance Costs. Those recommendations being 1, the provincial government adopt a model of full proportional liability to replace joint and several liability, implement enhancements to the existing limitation periods, including the continued applicability of the existing 10-day rule on slip and fall cases, given recent judicial interpretations, and whether a 1-year limitation period may be beneficial. 2, implement a cap for economic loss awards, increase the catastrophic impairment default benefit limited to $2 million, increase third-party liability coverage to $2 million in government-regulated automobile insurance plans, assess and implement additional measures which would support lower premiums or alternatives to the provision of insurance services by other entities such as nonprofit insurance reciprocals. 6, compel the insurance industry to supply all necessary financial evidence, including premium claims and deductible limit changes, which support its and municipal arguments as to the fiscal impact of joint and several liability. 7, establish a provincial and municipal working group to consider the above and put forward recommendations to the Attorney General. B, respectfully request the provincial government release the results of its review of joint and several liability conducted in 2019, and C, that a copy of this resolution be delivered to the Honorable Doug Downey, Attorney General, and also Steve Clark, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the current AMO President, Jamie McGarvey at AMO. So by way of explanation, if I could, I'll try and keep it simple. This joint and several liability, it's a legal concept. It's imposed by provincial legislation. What it means is this: if you're a city and you've been sued and the court determines you're 1% responsible, because the court will do that. Joint liability means, well, if no one else, if the 99% of the others who are responsible, they can't pay you, the 1%, or you're going to pay the 100%. That's called joint and several liability. Several liability is if you're 1% responsible, then you pay 1% of the overall damage award. And municipalities, many of us have experienced situations where the city has been very minimally responsible, less than 10%, but ends up paying huge damage awards because the other individuals or corporations or businesses being sued aren't properly insured. It's imposed a huge liability on municipalities. And the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Mr. Chair, has really advocated for a number of years for this. So is the OBCM, Ontario Big City Mayor's Caucus. And it was thought originally back in 2018-19, this provincial government was not going to respond very favorably to the request. They were sending signals they really didn't want to do it and wouldn't consider it. And then recently in the fall, there was some indication, and governments often do this kind of subtly, that they were prepared to take a second look at it. So this is part of a second front or a second go around by AMO and OBCM to lobby the provincial government, convince them to make some changes that strike a more reasonable balance between the interests of those who are victims and who are suing for damages or compensation, and those who have to pay, especially municipalities. So that's the short form explanation. It gets a lot more technical because there are a lot more provisions, but they're all orientated to the same thing, striking a better balance in our civil compensation system.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. You still have 2 more minutes if you want to give us the long version.
So it's actually quite, it's a little bit boring, so, but it's still important.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. First time speaker in the room from the 3rd Ward, Councillor Dan McCreary.
Chair, thank you very much. And I do agree completely with the mayor. It is lengthy, complicated, and boring. Good work, Mayor. Good work in bringing this forward, and I hope it's well supported. I'd like to get your assent to ensure that copies are provided to the Premier, to MPP Will Bowman, and MPP Toby Barrett.
That would be a friendly amendment. We'll add that to C. If Councillor Utley agrees, I think. Would you agree to that? Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Done.
No further speakers. Would you like to wrap, Mayor Davis?
Please vote for it.
I call the vote.
Item 8.2, joint and several liability with the friendly amendment carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Antosky, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
My favorite quote, we're here for a good time, not a long time. No notice of motion. This meeting is adjourned.